Hello and welcome to Election Night 2014 with Europarl TV.
For the next 3.5 hours, we'll be bringing the news as it happens here in the European Parliament.
All through the night, we'll have interviews, analysis, reports from European capitals, exit poll updates, and by the end, the results.
Exactly. Now, there's a lot hanging on these elections. One have 400 million voters made of the crisis. What are the challenges coming ahead?
I'm Paul Anderson.
And I'm Miriam Zaidi. Welcome to Election Night.
A warm welcome to our continuous coverage of the European elections 2014. Joining us for the duration is Michael Keding, Professor of European Integration and EU Politics at the University of Duisburg-Essen in Germany, guiding us through these elections and the corridors of power here in Brussels. We'll be breaking our programme up into bite-sized themes that reflect the issues of the moment and the challenges of the future. First, Michael, give me a short impression to start off with. Have you seen any seismic shifts here?
Well, good evening, Paul. I think there have been some seismic shifts over the last couple of days already, starting off in the Netherlands, I think, and we will see. We have the polls, the latest results from Germany. Also there will be clear messages. We have seen now the first figures from Greece. I think there will be on all sides, but there will be surprises as well, because there won't be only changes to the right, but also to the left.
Plenty of upheavals. Well, we'll be discussing all that during the course of the next 3.5 hours. Let's get the latest updates from the exit polls with Mariam.
Thank you, Paul. Now, a quick reminder, of course, that voting is still underway in 21 member states. The first projection based on actual results will start coming in after 10 p.m. tonight. But we do have the results of the first official exit poll, the projected results across some member states. And joining me to discuss this is Natalia De Silva, who will be our poll expert throughout the night. Natalia, welcome to the programme. Now, what can you tell us about these results?
Well, we can start with the first exit polls we have from France. And here we can see how the major and the biggest change we can see compared to 2009 elections is that the National Front, Marine Le Pen's Eurosceptic right-wing party, has gained more than an 18% of votes.
That is a huge jump now.
Indeed, and that has made that the Socialist party, which is the center-left current ruling party in France, is pushed to the third position in the race after the second, which would be the center-right UMP party.
Okay, let's now move to the biggest member state, to Germany. Any surprises there?
Well, in Germany, we can see that Angela Merkel's Conservative Party stays more or less the same. The biggest difference is in the Socialist Party, the second force, which could gain at around 7% of the votes. Let's remind that Martin Schulz is one of the 5 candidates for the presidency of the European Commission from this party.
Of course, our outgoing president of the Parliament.
Indeed. And we can also see very interesting point, this AFD, Alternative for Germany, which is a new party, also Eurosceptic, which could enter the parliament with a 6.8% of the votes.
That's quite a big share. And what about Greece?
In the case of Greece, the major change comes from this party, SYRIZA, Alexis Tsipras, another candidate, indeed, which has gained at around 18%, almost 24% of the
It's okay,
votes.
it's early on the night, it's hard to maybe see the numbers.
No, almost 24%. And that has made, of course, that the center-left PASOK party has lost many votes, almost 30%.
Wow, 30% is a lot. Now, what about one of our smaller member states, Austria? What can you tell us maybe about them?
Indeed, in the latest polls we have from Austria, we see that the situation with the 2 major parties, the Popular Party of Austria and the Social Democrats, which are center-left and center-right, both of them, they are in a coalition government in the country, stay more or less the same. And it's also remarkable that the Freedom Party of Austria has gained almost 7% of the votes. This is a Eurosceptic party.
Okay, Natalia, thanks so much. We'll be back with Natalia later. But right now, let's see how the mood was like across Brussels as people, of course, went to vote.
We're going to cut back to us, Mariam. Thank you both very much indeed. And we're going to analyse with Michael Kadin from the University of Duisburg-Essen in Germany some of those results that we've just seen. Let's go through block by block, Michael Kadin. Yes. The Front National emerging as the biggest party. I mean, many people predicted that, but what is your calculation of what that means?
Well, basically it means that, well, it has become the biggest political power in the European elections in France, and it also means that the ruling government party, the Socialists, already very weak in 2009,
they came in third in this election after the UMP.
The UMP also lost tremendously, and what you basically see is that also with the losses of, well, you could say the combined effect of the Green Party in France, that you clearly see strength at the outskirts, at the borders, so to say, with Front National. I think it might surprise the one or the other, and we will have to see how many people actually went voting.
If you add that characteristic that we've just seen to the fact, we haven't had it confirmed yet, but it seems likely that in the United Kingdom, UKIP, the United Kingdom Independence Party, will also emerge as the front runner. I know that these are not political bedfellows. There's little chance of the FN that in the United Kingdom, UKIP, the United Kingdom Independence Party, will also emerge as the front runner. I know that these are not political bedfellows. There's little chance of the FN. No. What does that mean for the composition of the Parliament in the future, do you think?
I think it's very important to keep in mind that Marine Le Pen went into the race by stating that she wants to create a new party group in the European Parliament. With this huge
That's a big shake-up, isn't it?
She will represent probably a major part in this new party, and UKIP clearly said they won't join it, so they themselves will probably remain in their party group themselves and remain also a very predominant national delegation within this party group.
And does that mean then if you have two extreme right parties incapable of joining forces, that in fact they shoot themselves in the foot, they diminish their capacity to shape an extreme right or a radical right agenda in the future parliamentary term, or not?
Well, I think what you need to keep in mind is basically decision-making in the European Parliament. Decisions are basically majoritarianly taken by a big majority, 70% by the Grand Coalition, if you want, by the EPP and the S&D. So until now, these right-wing parties have never been really needed to find majorities in the European Parliament. Now we will see.
Changing.
It is changing, and it might polarize and politicize EU decision-making, future decision-making in the European Parliament. Yes.
Oh, let's consider one or two other of the statistics we've just heard in your own country, Germany. The SPD has done a little better than expected, or as expected?
Yes, it's to be seen whether we can call it now a Schulz effect or not in the SPD, but I think what is very important to point out is that the ruling government, I mean SPD and CDU are in the government right now. It is not the CDU itself which lost momentum, but it's the Bavarian CSU, which because of or despite of having a rather European skeptic campaign, lost tremendously and is actually responsible for the losses of the EPP of Angela Merkel's party.
And that plays very much into the presidential, European Commission presidential ambitions of Martin Schulz, the current president of the Parliament.
Yes, I think there is probably 2-3% points. We will have to see the figures and statistics later, but I wouldn't be surprised to learn in the end that 2-3% of those additions to the Social Democrats, that these might be responsible for the Schulz effect, yes.
One very quick bite before we move on to our next item. Again, from the statistics we heard, the radical party of Alexis Tsipras, another presidential candidate for the European Commission, very strong showing from practically nowhere.
Yes, it's now the biggest and strongest force before even Neo Demokratia, which might be a surprise for the one or the other. I think this is a dramatic situation in Greece. That's what we clearly see, yes. And we look forward to analyze this further throughout the evening.
And just a short update from our conversation earlier, 25% apparently for the Front National in France. Now let's see what the mood was like across Brussels as people went to vote at the same time in their own national and local elections.
Up to 400 million citizens from across Europe have been called on to elect their 751 members of the European Parliament. The elections kicked off in the Netherlands and the UK on the 22nd of May, But the masses didn't flood to vote. Turnout has been estimated at 36% and 37% respectively. Today, voting takes place in 21 of the 28 member states. In this polling station in Brussels, the preparations are in full swing.
We regularly check the voting booths to see if there's anything around, like little papers that may influence voters.
Over 800 citizens will come to cast their vote. It's a huge figure. Voting is compulsory in Belgium, but that's not to say citizens are voting without conviction.
We've been talking about a more social Europe for a long time. I think it's now time to get started on it. We need a European policy that deals especially with financial issues and with the crisis in the different countries. We need more solidarity. We need to stand against the transatlantic treaty.
I think we still have to put up with shortages for a while more and more taxation. I think ultimately a united Europe will lead to a better future for everybody, but I think we have a lot of pain before we get the full benefits of it.
In 2009, voter turnout in the European elections was around 43%. This year, the challenge has been to mobilise more voters.
Okay, well, it's time now to take a look at what people are saying on social media. And joining me in the studio is our social media expert, Thilo Kunzemann. Welcome to the programme.
Hey, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Now, what can you tell us? What are people talking about? What's trending?
Let me show you on the screen. We've got our the amount of tweets sent per minute all over Europe on the European elections. And you can see a huge spike there around 8 o'clock. And there on the upper right corner, you see the counter running. So at the moment we're...
And what is this counter? Just so people are more aware.
Every tweet, it's been sent all over Europe on the elections. European elections, Élections européennes, Europawahl, whatever. The last few days we were at about 2 or 3 tweets a second. Now we're up to 30, 40 tweets a second.
Wow, that is a big jump there. And what about all of these bubbles we can see in the middle? Tell us about that.
What you see here are the topics most mentioned by people in relation to the European elections. So it changed quite a lot. Yesterday was about go vote, go out there tomorrow, it will be important. Today we saw a change coming to encore, you still have time, go out. And now people are discussing the results, the first results they got, and this big spike at 8 p.m.
Yeah, 8 p.m., yeah.
Was the first French exit polls, and this is also reflected here. You see French parties mentioned.
And of course, this would be Marine Le Pen's National Front right there. The most talked about. So looking at this, they would be the most talked about right now. Yeah?
This changes every few minutes. The whole tool is in real time. So if you go on our website, Elections Night 2014, you can watch this, you can watch it unfold, and you can also see how influencers change. So at the moment, obviously, mostly French influencers. Mm-hmm. As results come in from other countries, we'll see it shift to other countries as well.
Now, you mentioned a website, but what about, can people interact with you? Do you have a Twitter account?
Well, I have a Twitter account, Thilo Kunzemann. So, yeah, you can send questions, especially on the stats. Happy to help, happy to give you the details. And interact. Go ahead.
Okay, lovely. Well, Thilo, we'll be back with you later, but time now to go back to Paul for an analysis of the elections.
I'm 20 and I'm very active on Facebook and all social networks, but I think there's not enough information at all on social media. In the press there is enough, but young people don't read it.
I'm interested, I keep myself informed and I'm trying to make the right choice. I know the Greek parties that will represent us in the European Parliament. I have to admit, I don't know very much about the European elections. There are many billboards for the local and the regional elections, but there's very little information on the European ones.
Europe is our future. If we all go and vote real democratic parties, there's also a chance that we have a European Parliament that has influence and that can also take measures, not only the single member states.
Thanks very much indeed for all that, Mariam. Okay, joining us in the studio now is Michael van Hulten, Managing Director of Vote Watch Europe. He's also a former MEP for the Socialists himself, with doubtless unique insights. And can I ask you first of all, Michael, what's your reaction to what you've seen so far tonight, bearing in mind that we haven't got the full picture yet?
Well, with Poll Watch 2014, which is our polling branch, we've been trying to forecast the election result for the last few months, and what we're seeing so far is very much in line with what we ourselves and others have been forecasting as well, which is that the large political groups, the Socialists and the EPP, are having to cede ground to the radical left and the radical right. So we're looking at the new European Parliament, which will be more fragmented than the existing one.
And what do you envisage then in terms of group formations? I mean, we suspect there may be a new group forming around Marine Le Pen's Front National success. But what about the other groups and the other MEPs forming alliances that perhaps we haven't seen so far in the Parliament?
Well, this is the big question, because indeed one big question will be whether the parties on the far right will manage to form a new political group. In order to do so, they need 7 parties representing at least 7 countries representing at least 25 MEPs. The question is whether they will manage that tonight. For instance, Slovakia's exit polls suggest the far right won't win a seat there, in which case it will be very difficult to get the right numbers. The other groups will also be scrambling to get the new MEPs on board. I mean, for instance, Grillo's MEPs from Italy are a big prize for any political group. Power in the European Parliament is very much dependent on how big your political group is. The main question will be which political group become the biggest, but then there's also the question of how well will the Liberals do, how well will the Greens do, and they'll be looking to these new MEPs to come and reinforce their numbers.
Do you expect, Michael Caden, that established groups, the EPP, the S&D, the Greens, ALDE, will reorient themselves, will redesign themselves or reinvent themselves in order to appeal to an electorate which is sending a fairly clear message, or will they stick their ground?
Yeah, well, I think they will have to. I mean,
reinvent themselves?
They will have to some extent reinvent themselves. I mean, the EPP will have to ask itself whether they still want to actually have the Fidesz party group and also the Berlusconi Forza Italia in their party group. That will be a major decision to be taken in terms of power politics, crucial. The Liberals we have seen, I mean, there will be some, the ANO in the Czech Republic will play importantly and might even become the biggest national delegation in the Liberals, together with the strengthened Dutch Liberal composition of left and right Liberals. So yes, there will be changes and shifts all over the place.
So voters around Europe who've said, okay, we've seen the shifts that we wanted to see, this is a democratic process, do you think that they will fairly quickly see policy changes that reflect their wishes, or is that too far down the line?
I would personally say that that's probably too far down the line. I think there will be changes here and there, and I think over the evening, we will see with regard to specific policy areas that the Parliament has new powers with the Lisbon Treaty, and it will probably also emphasize here and there specific new ideas, such as the free trade agreement. There will be probably some movements, some changes. But I think it's too early to call on this one.
Okay, Michael, give us just a flavour of what it's actually going to be like on the floor of the Parliament in the coming days and weeks. How long does it take the groups to work out who belongs to whom and how we can all move forward? Is it a matter of days, or is it a much longer process?
It's a matter of weeks. The political groups have until the end of June, the 24th of June, until to form themselves and to round up all the troops. And then the week after that, the new Parliament meets in plenary session for the first time and will elect the new president. And by then, it will have to be clear what the power relationship within the Parliament is. So there's a lot of work to do in the next few weeks, but it will take some time. There will be tough negotiations between groups, especially those new parties joining the Parliament know that they can make or break the position of one of the existing groups, and they will try to extract a very high price for their support.
Okay, let's pause there a moment and take a look at the country which was among the first to go to the polls on Thursday, the UK. We spent a day in the northern English city of Manchester.
Elections? What elections? In Manchester, there is an inescapable absence of EU election campaigning, with no candidate or party poster in sight and hardly a word in the national press. It made the front page headlines in just one of the top papers.
Unfortunately, I just didn't hear a lot about the election, so I really didn't even know it was happening, which is kind of unfortunate because I would have liked to be involved.
The only campaigning to be seen is by these young Green Party activists.
Europe is quite far away. I think a lot of people don't realise how much Europe affects them, and therefore they don't really feel that they should vote.
The rise of Eurosceptic party UKIP has dominated the UK electoral campaign and has even reached the traditional Labour stronghold of Manchester. Immigration has been the party's election mantra.
Personally, I'm going to vote for UKIP because I'm nothing against foreigners, but it's just the amount of foreigners coming into the country. That's what a lot of people are going to vote for UKIP.
Why UKIP has been so successful is that Nigel Farage is able to appeal to the working class as well as the middle class in this country. So it will be interesting to see how many traditional Labour voters are likely to shift towards UKIP.
A few kilometres away from the centre of Manchester, UKIP has hoped to gain ground in Wythenshawe, one of the biggest council housing estates in Europe.
When you've got apathy, you get low turnouts, and then the sort of parties on the right, the extremists, the minorities, they prosper from that, they thrive on that.
As the day draws to an end, just a trickle of voters are heading to the polls.
You're watching an election special from Europarl TV, direct from the European Parliament. Results are just over 2 hours away. Coming up in the next hour, the latest polls, trends and views, and some future gazing. What changes might we see? Right now, with me in the studio are Professor Michael Keding and Michael van Hulten, EU experts both. Let me ask you, first of all, Michael, I'll turn to you first. The European Union is often accused of sitting on a democratic, or managing even a democratic deficit. Do you think these elections have made up for that accusation?
Well, we will have to see in the end how do you assess democratic deficit. I mean, you can have a look at the turnout, basically predictions, and see to what extent people actually went to the polls.
Not very many, it seems, from the predictions we've had so far.
Yes, there are slight increases in Germany apparently, but there are dramatic results we see, I think, from
13% in Slovakia, down from 19%. It's
Indeed.
A spectacular fall from a spectacularly low base.
But on the other hand, voter turnout, first of all, is not the only way of measuring democracy or legitimacy of EU decision-making. But at the same time, we also see that this is not something unique to the European Union as such. We see declining turnouts across the European member states. We see them in the United States with midterm US congressional elections. They're also below 50%. So I think we have to, well, relax to some extent. Obviously, figures such as 13% are dramatic. I fully agree.
Okay, before I turn to you with my next question, just an update from the exit polls. The party of Alexis Tsipras, the radical left party in Greece, up to 28% already. So this is a spectacular climb. Michael van Hulten, can I ask you first of all to address this question that many people raise, that in fact, however much it's wanted in Brussels that these are perceived as European elections. In fact, they're national elections in every single country on a European stage. Do you think there's any truth in that remark?
I think that is true. I think the European Parliament elections are what political scientists call second-order elections. So people often base their voting behavior not on the issues that are actually at stake in that particular election. Having said that, that's often also the case, for instance, for local elections or for regional elections. National politics tends to dominate. What is different this time, I think, is that European politics has permeated national politics in the last 5 years in a way that was unthinkable beforehand. I mean, you think particularly, of course, about the euro crisis and the austerity measures that's resulted in, but also the rise of the far right and the fact that the far right parties have been very active in calling on their supporters to vote in these elections to further their goals. And I think the fact that this has happened means that national politics is now more about EU politics, and therefore these elections have become more European.
Do you think there's a bit of a paradox, Michael Keding, in the fact that 75% of legislation which affects people's lives comes from Europe? So in fact, people are campaigning and voting on issues which concern them most of all in order to get MEPs into the European Parliament to try and represent their point of view. And those same MEPs are going to have to be passing and dealing with 75% of the ordinary stuff of our ordinary lives.
Yes, if I may quickly come back to
of course, yeah, absolutely, please.
Just said, I think I fully agree with what he just said, and just adding to it that you also will have to reflect on some results. For example, the performance of the NVA here in Belgium will be a national reason behind it. There will be not really a European reason behind it. I think that's very much important to highlight, that some performances of some national parties are clearly linked to national topics. On the other hand, we clearly see, and I fully agree, that national election campaigns have been Europeanized. We see the German elections just half a year ago. It was a European election, if you want. It was full with European topics, even if some might not agree, but I fully am convinced about this. With regard to the other question, I think what in this respect, 70% of legislation, coming from the EU. I think what is important to point at is to understand why people actually do not go and vote. Why do they not realize and materialize and understand why actually, despite the fact that 70% comes out of Brussels, it doesn't matter for my daily life. And I think here we will have to really investigate and to ask ourselves why people do not vote. People do not vote, as we know, because they find the European Union too complex, because they don't see the direct link, the relationship, and some basically do not feel any more integrated in the society. And some of them do find then basically a haven, a safe haven, so to say, in the radical right, but also left.
Okay, let's just hold it there. We've walked through some of what's at play in some individual countries. Let's take a look at what some of their journalists think of it all in this mini roundup.
How much coverage has the European election campaign received in the Union's media? Which subjects have been covered? Has Europe been at the centre of the media? For this Italian journalist, the campaign coverage in Italy has concentrated on local issues, to his great despair.
It's quite a disaster in the sense that it's so much focused on Italian internal issues, and whether the Grillo movement is going to be voted more than the Renzi party who's in power.
In Great Britain, renowned for its Euroscepticism, one subject has been the focus of attention during the campaign.
Immigration is a massive topic in the United Kingdom, as it is in other parts of Europe, and the rise of UKIP, a really popular party in the United Kingdom, has really brought it to the forefront.
A few kilometres from the European Parliament, in the offices of the Belgian newspaper Le Soir, for Eurek, all the major issues of the campaign have been covered in Belgium.
Je crois pas qu'on puisse dire que la thématique européenne soit toujours suffisamment couverte.
I don't think you can say that the topic of Europe is always sufficiently covered in Belgium. I think it's always insufficiently covered.
Je crois plus couverte que dans beaucoup d'autres pays européens.
But it is covered more in Belgium than in many other European countries, for the simple reason that Belgium is Brussels, and there is a proximity of the European institutions.
Tout simplement, on est proche de l'Europe.
More than 1,000 journalists have been accredited to cover election night from the European Parliament, indicating that Europe will have a good place in the Union's press after the election. But for how long?
Welcome back. Now, we have correspondents in 4 different cities across Europe, in Athens, in Berlin, in Paris and in Warsaw. Time now to go to Athens and to George. Kalispera, George. What have you got for us? What's the mood like in Athens?
Bonsoir, bonsoir d'Athènes, bonsoir du quartier général de SYRIZA.
From our headquarters, things are heating up here. A few minutes ago, the Minister for the Interior announced a figure of very close to the outcome. So we could be looking at around 26-27% for SYRIZA. SYRIZA would therefore come in ahead of New Democracy, the centre-right party, currently forming part of the coalition government in Greece. New Democracy, 23 to 30%. Big surprise, the neo-Nazi party would have obtained 9.46%. It would therefore have ranked third in the elections. PASOK now, also part of the coalition government, 8.10%. They are pleased. Polls had shown that they might have received an even lower share of the vote. We also have 6% roughly for Potami.
Okay, lovely. Well, that was George in Athens. Now we're going to quickly cross over to our roving reporter around the Parliament, Maria Maggiore. Maria, what have you got for us?
Hi, Mariam. I'm here in the main corridor of the European Parliament, the heart where I will help you to live this incredible atmosphere of the electoral night with a lot of interviews, because we have to say that this year, this time, there is a strong interest in European elections. So I start asking a senior journalist in Brussels, Lorenzo Consoli. He comes, we have just seen you in a subject just before. So Lorenzo works for the Italian news agency TM News. Lorenzo, what are the answers you are looking for tonight? What are the main challenges?
I think there are three main issues. One is if the challenge of the parliamentarization of European democracy is going to be successful or not. This is the challenge that all the candidates that the major European parties have put forward for the post of President of the Commission. They are launching this challenge to the governments. If they stick on their word, if they don't bend to the order that could come from the national parties, they will impose their will to the governments, and this is a great thing because it will mean the parliamentarization of Europe.
Just a moment, we have the time. Lorenzo, just explain what does it mean, parliamentarization? What do you mean? We are talking about the election, the nomination of the President of the European Commission, and the Parliament for the first time can propose. What do you mean? It depends on also the turnout of these elections, the fact that the Parliament will be able to impose a candidate.
Well, it is because it's the first time that the Lisbon Treaty is in force before a European election. And the Lisbon Treaty actually provides for this very clear, even if a little bit ambiguous, statement that the heads of state and government, they have to take into account the elections, the result of the elections. What does it mean? Well, the major European parties have said very clearly that means that we will have to put forward candidates for the presidency of the Commission, and you, the governments, you will have to choose between these candidates and not somebody else. And the candidate, of course, will have to be chosen is the candidate of if not the party, the coalition, the majority in the parliament will result from the elections.
Will the turnout be a criterium to give this power to the parliament, to impose the name, yes or no?
I don't think so. Of course, a very weak turnout is a weakness for the parliament. It's a weakness when the parliament negotiates with the governments. But don't forget that the turnout is very different in different member states. And for instance, in the US, which is the biggest democracy, one of the biggest democracies in the world, the turnout is very low. So it is not that the criterion.
Mariam, can I go on?
Okay. Maria, carry on.
Good. We will speak later. Back to you, Mariam.
Okay, well, that was our roving reporter around the Parliament, Maria, and of course she'll be back with us throughout the night, talking to different people, trying to get a real buzz, a sense of how people are feeling around the Parliament. Well, now, let's turn now to the 2014 elections, which have, of course, been billed as different and the most democratic, are they? Well, let's take a look at this.
I don't know what that is, the Commission, and I don't know who its president is. I think European leaders must be much more sure and much more clear about the process in which they will elect the heads of European Commission.
It seems like a democracy, a debate is emerging at the European level with the future president of the Commission being proposed by the members of the European Parliament. So that's a very big change for European democracy. I think it's important for there to be a Greek candidate for the position of Commission President, even if I disagree with Alexis Tsipras on some issues. We'll see how the election go.
Θα δούμε πώς θα εξελιχθούν οι εκλογές στην Κυριακή.
You're tuned to Election Night Special with Europarl TV, with me, Paul Anderson, and Mariam Zaidi. As we've seen, plenty of exit polls are pointing to big gains for the far right, a commendable result for the Liberals, and a strong showing for the far left. Results are due in the next 2 hours. Meanwhile, we're going to take a look at what the future might hold. Professor Michael Kading from the University of Duisburg-Essen in Germany is still with us. We're joined by Christoph Garrasch, Editor-in-Chief of Europolitics, Paul Cunningham, Brussels correspondent for the Irish national broadcaster RTE, and Maha Ghanem, Brussels-based journalist and director of a web documentary on young people. Before we come to our debate and our questions as to what the future might hold, I just want to give you some more statistics, some more exit polling from Germany, which, as expected, has the CDU-CSU party of Angela Merkel, coalition of Angela Merkel, led by Angela Merkel, at 36%. The SPD at 27.5%, the Socialists, but most remarkably the AFD, the anti-Euro Alternative für Deutschland, at 6.5%, which will give them seats in the European Parliament. Let me turn to you, first of all, Christoph Garrasch, and ask you, you know, it's perhaps too early, but I know you know a lot about European politics. What do you think the complexion of the European Parliament is going to look like?
Alors moi je pense, et les derniers sondages avant les élections montraient bizarrement deux choses. Un, évidemment avec un nombre de députés moindre par rapport à 2009, puisqu'on va passer à 751 députés, donc une majorité confortable malgré tout du groupe du Parti populaire européen et du groupe des sociaux-démocrates qui vont continuer à se partager le pouvoir. Entre 410 députés pour l'ensemble, plus une majorité confortable qui viendra donc conforter le résultat du PPE et du SND, avec les Verts, avec les libéraux, etc. Au total, qu'est-ce qui va se passer? Je pense qu'il y aura à peu près 500 eurodéputés qui seront plus ou moins pro-européens. Alors évidemment, on peut toujours faire le verre à moitié vide et le verre à moitié plein. De l'autre côté, vous allez avoir une entrée massive d'eurosceptiques. Alors, qu'est-ce qu'on met dans les eurosceptiques?
People have been talking about Eurosceptics taking over the parliament, but who do we put in that category? The communists, Marine Le Pen and her friends, the UKIP party. We're going to see new entrants. Eurosceptics coming in. We're talking about a 200 MEP figure, but is this going to be a sea change?
You speak about 500 pro-European plus pro-European deputies. Do you think that they will become, what's the word, I don't want to say poisoned or polluted, but altered by the fact that there are so many more extremists? Very briefly before we move on, Christophe.
Oui, alors on n'est pas au Conseil européen, on n'est
We're
pas au
not at
Conseil
the
de l'Union,
European Council, the Council of the European Union.
voter
We
des
are at the
majorités,
European
c'est à
Parliament,
majorité,
so you need a majority for a vote to go through, a majority of 750 MEPs. The EPP and the Socialists and Democrats will be able to build majorities. They may work with the Liberals and the Greens on some topics. It will be possible to continue to press ahead. I'm not saying that the Eurosceptic vote, if confirmed this evening, would be completely without effect. But I do think it has been anticipated.
Do you think that the work schedule and the agenda of the coming term of Parliament will be significantly altered by the outcome of these votes at all? Or will it be business as usual, because that business is already defined anyway in terms of the multi-annual financial framework and the upcoming 7-year workload of the European Commission? What's the balance here that needs to be struck?
Yes, that's a very good question to the extent that, well, we have seen the 9, so to say, presidential debates on television, and here the presidential candidates, they put forward some topics they wanted to basically elaborate upon. Ukraine is very much external relations, pretty much high on the agenda. Sanctions, yes or no, more sanctions, yes or no. It's the free trade agreement issues, it's the anti-discrimination law, it's on the agenda.
Okay, Paul Cunningham, let me turn to you. What are you reporting to Irish voters about, what's happened over the past 4 days and what's happening now?
Well, I think to a certain extent I've been listening to what the voters have been saying in Ireland, and it would appear to be a fracturing of the relationship that Irish voters have had with the European Parliament. If you look at exit polls, and that's all they are, we can't put it any higher than that, it would appear that Sinn Féin are going to win 3 seats. They never had any seats before, and they'll be joining GUE. We have another MEP most likely, and he's most certainly anti-EU, campaigning against the Habitats Directive, campaigning against this imposition of law on Irish people. So I think there's a different mood, and that certainly comes from the question of the austerity measures which have been in place for so many years, and the difficulties that people feel, even though the headline figures like unemployment is going down, the economy is returning, and people don't feel it on the ground. And so they are fighting back, and they're exercising that in the ballot box.
And that, I suspect, is a position which is reflected in many countries which also have been operating under austerity regimes. Let's take a short break and look at some of the candidates for the European Commission President as they stand at the moment.
Your vote can help decide who will be the next President of the European Commission. Could it be one of these 5? But who are they? First up, one of the longest-serving EU heads of state, former Prime Minister of Luxembourg and former head of the Eurogroup. He's got experience and helped manage Europe through the crisis.
Jean-Claude Juncker, being 5 years back, would you do the same?
Whoever wants there to be investment, growth and jobs has to tidy up public finances.
Next up, the outgoing president of the Parliament and candidate for the Social Democrats group, Martin Schulz.
I want a European Union which is just and fair, which is putting the interest of ordinary citizens first.
But is he the right man to assume the helm of Europe's executive arm? Guy Verhofstadt is the Liberal candidate and former Prime Minister of Belgium who wants more EU integration.
We need a European Union who is stronger and who can defend his model against China, against India, against the US.
What about the lady of the pack? German Green MEP Ska Keller has a lot of fans, but is she too green to assume the mantle of the presidency?
I am fighting for Europe that cares about people more than it cares about banks. A Europe where we revive the European dream of not letting anybody fall anymore.
Last but not least, we have Greek politician Alexis Tsipras. But can he really be the man for Europe, or is he focused too heavily on his own country?
We will try immediately to get the Troika out of the EU institutions. The Katastroika, as we call them correctly.
So, do they have you convinced? But more importantly, outside the Euro bubble, does anyone really know who this famous 5 are? And do they really offer anything new for the European project?
Let's not forget the role and the place of young people in Europe and in these elections. We'll find out during the course of this programme in a little more detail trends which we can follow in terms of seeing how young people have voted. But I'm going to turn now to somebody who knows a good deal more than I do about that question. Maha Ghanem, you are a documentary maker and have focused over the past 6 months, as I understand it, on a film which is checking out the views of young people all across Europe. Tell me what has struck you as the most impressionable thing from your conversations with them?
Well, first of all, I found young people, the hundreds of young people I met with, they are interested in politics. They are interested in being part of society, of life. They're not only on Twitter and Facebook taking selfies. So they're really engaged. They want to be part of society, but they don't want to do it the old way. So when politicians say, well, young people, they are not interested in politics, they are not interested in politics the way you are doing it. They want to be more included, and they don't want to have politicians turning to them only when it's elections.
And do they really not feel engaged? I mean, we heard in that short video clip one of the youngest politicians in Parliament, a presidential candidate for the Greens, Tricolour. She must speak more readily to young people than many of the other candidates.
Absolutely. I was with Ska and I met a lot of young Greens, and of course they are there and they are on the ground, and you have a lot of young people that are engaged with political parties. I met young people from the Green Party, Socialist, Liberals, and last week Conservative Party in Manchester, in fact. So yes, of course, they still have a very large base of young people included, but there's this whole other part of young people in society that maybe they don't have a college or university degree, but they're still here and they still want to have their voices heard, and they are engaged, but in a different way.
And do you get a sense at all that many of them, or any of them, are radicalized, that they believe the parties of the far right or the far left are the parties who are going to answer to their needs and demands?
Well, yes, you have that trend because they are part of society, and you have all trends in society. So as part of society, yes, they do, some of them to some extent do believe that, but like some of them believe in the Greens political program, I would say.
Okay, before we move on, I know that you met one other person who was a rather surprising person called Captain Europe, if you can believe it. Captain Europe is a Brit promoting and extolling the virtues of Europe. I mean, tell us who Captain Europe is and what he's got to say for himself. I'm sorry he's not here, by the way, tonight. We did try, we genuinely did.
Well, I don't know who he is. I don't know his secret identity.
He's a mystery man, okay.
No, it's yes, well,
is he
it's
caped? What does he look
I
like?
also wanted to keep because, well, you know, in these times of Google and Wikipedia, I feel like it's still nice to still have a mystery out there for other people to solve. It's not my job. I mean, I'm focusing on young people. So those other people that want to know who he is, maybe they should go out and try by themselves to figure out who he is. But yes, he's British and he's fighting for the European Union, which is quite surprising, it's true.
Okay, thanks very much indeed for that. Let's pause it there just for the moment to check out the latest poll statistics. Mariam, over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Now, just before we go to the polls, first of all, we're going to check in with another one of our capitals, and we're going over to Paris to check in with the lovely Chloe Fabre. Bonsoir, Chloe.
Hello, Mariam. Good evening.
Good evening, Chloe. How are you doing?
How are you?
Good, thank you. Now, what can you tell us about what's
thank you
going
very
on
much.
in France? Where are you right now? You seem to be inside some
France,
sort of building.
Here, I am at the UDI Modem Centrist Party here in Paris, and they got with the calculation we have, they tend to have 10% of the result of the score. And here the biggest surprise is about the Front National Party, Marine Le Pen party. They should be number one with 25%, and they say they are really happy to be the first political party here in France. Just behind, we've got the UMP, right-wing party, with 20.3%, and then the Socialist Party, Hollande, with 14.7%.
And so, Chloe, is this a bit of a
25% for
Chloe,
the Front
is this a
National?
bit of a catastrophe, you could say, for the EPP or the S&D, the Socialists and the European People's Party?
Yeah, it's a shock anyway for everybody here. We've got really big reactions because it's going to be a big change in the distribution of political forces here in national politics. And yeah, they said it's an earthquake. We've got, for example, the words from Manuel Valls, Prime Minister. He said it's an earthquake. We are living a confidence crisis. And for example, Jean-François Copé, the UMP leader, said we saw today a gigantic anger of French people. But this will shake a lot the national politics here in France.
Okay, well, Chloe, we're going to have to leave it there, but of course we will be back with Chloe to get the latest from Paris. But right now, Natalia's back with us. Now, Natalia, before we were talking about the first projections. So what have you got for us now? I mean, we were going to talk about voter turnout, but unfortunately those figures haven't yet been released. So what more can you tell us about these sort of projections that we're getting in?
Indeed, we'll continue with the exit polls we have from Poland. Here we can see that the two major parties, the Civic Platform, which has joined the EPP, the center-right political group in the European Parliament, and the Law and Justice Party, which has joined the UK Conservatives group in the Parliament, have managed to more or less keep the same level of the same percentage of votes, but with the...
But are we seeing the EPP group's party sneaking ahead, or is the EPP group's party, are they the ones who've maybe pipped the EPP to the post? What are we seeing? Who could possibly be the victor there?
Well, here we see that the Civic Platform, as you say, the EPP party, has still the lead with 32.8% of the votes. But it's true that it has lost around 12%, but still has managed to keep the leading position ahead of the Civic Platform, which has a more nationalistic, a little bit of Eurosceptic approach than the Conservative one.
Okay, so, I mean, obviously in Poland, we could say, is quite a conservative country. But tell me some more of the results. I mean, I've seen them, we've just switched to Sweden.
Exactly. In the case of Sweden, we see how the Social Democrats have managed to keep the lead with a 25.1% of the votes, only few 0.6% more than in 2009. They are followed by the moderate party, which has 3% votes less than in 2009. And this moderate party, by the way, it's of the EPP family, so the conservative family here in the European Parliament, and the Liberal party, which more or less has kept the same level of votes.
Now, Natalia, we're getting results from different countries, but they are not coming in possibly as fast as we thought. But is there maybe a sense now of which party is maybe faring a lot better, or are the predictions as they have been coming in really working? Are they turning out to be, you could say, true?
Well, from the exit polls we have been getting, the hints that we can see is that the EPP is very likely to stay as the first party, but we can see that in countries such as Germany, as we commented before, the Social Democrats have become stronger, so they are likely to cut the distance as the second strongest political force in the European Parliament.
Okay, lovely. And we'll be back with Natalia a bit later on, but now it's time to go back to Paul.
Thank you very much indeed, Mariam and Natalia. Let's look at some of those figures very quickly before we move on to our debate. Christophe Garrasch, what do you make of them so far?
Sur la présidence, sur les élections.
No, on the exit poll updates that we've just had.
Un premier point, c'est évidemment la percée notamment en France
is the Front National breakthrough in France. The French Prime Minister has compared this to an earthquake. Manuel Valls. This is a shock, seeing Front National becoming the #1 party in this election, with almost 1/3 of all the seats available for the country in the European Parliament. This is really a big setback. I think for the European elections, going beyond the mere number of seats in the European Parliament, it's interesting to look at what is going to happen in each of the member states. This tidal wave that we're seeing.
Paul Cunningham, how do you see it? Do you see it as a kind of tsunami or an earthquake, or
Well, certainly I think things are changing. In the Irish case, it sometimes can be overstated if you look at the numbers. I think on the broader European scheme, I mean, if we were looking at what was taking place in France, it was widely predicted, but it's still unclear how that's going to translate into a cohesive bloc within Parliament. It didn't seem to work too well for Mr. Wilders in Holland, that he was aligned with Marine Le Pen, and we're unclear as to how the others are going to do, most notably in Italy, and the Five Star Movement. Beppe Grillo says he's going to take his own course. So I think there's an awful lot of dust that has to settle before we're going to be able to make just how much of an earthquake this is going to be.
And your thoughts on the same question, Michael?
Yes, I think with the Polish figures and the French, you can clearly see the complexity of EU politics now, because you see actually right now in Poland that the ruling government parties have basically lost but in the end they will gain in terms of size at the national delegation within the EPP and also the ECR. It's very, I think, because of France losing the UMP, the Italian we will see later on probably as well. Nevertheless, despite the losses of the Polish EPP party, they will nevertheless become more powerful and more influential in the EPP as a national delegation. And the same holds for Law and Justice. I mean, it will overtake the British Conservatives in the ECR with the figures we just saw.
Okay, we have just time to look at the other upcoming important function of the European Parliament, however it settles down, which is the election of the European Commission President, the first time that the selection of European Commission or election of European Commission President has to reflect the patterns of voting. Christophe Garrasch, what do you think is shaping up to happen in that respect?
Alors la première chose, c'est l'impact sur l'abstention.
We need to look at the turnout, abstention rates. We will see whether this presidential race has had a bearing on the turnout. I'm afraid more than likely it will not have been the case. Second point,
est-ce que ces élections vont vraiment changer la donne?
Will these elections really bring about a sea change? Many legal details are still unfamiliar, still unknown, so it is not clear how the new Commission President will be appointed. We don't know which party the new Commission President will belong to, what sort of majorities will be built. We don't know if the European Council will go along with this. We are here on election day and we still don't know what will happen.
Do you think it's possible that a wild card could suddenly emerge? We've been living with the fact or the knowledge that 5 potential candidates are coming from here, including Mr. Jean-Claude Juncker.
I think it's unlikely. We were talking about surprises. I think everyone would be delighted with it, but I think it's unlikely that a big surprise will happen. I think you mentioned earlier about the main contenders for the position of Commission President, and I think most didn't penetrate most people's minds. I think in Ireland, Martin Schulz maybe, the rest of the field not really at all.
How do you think it's going to pan out, Michael Kading? Do you think that, that it will be possible to find a compromise between the different groups and the different bodies here in the Parliament to select a candidate that all can agree to?
Yes, typical European compromise, however, will take some time. That's the issue. It will not be solved within a couple of weeks, and I don't think in a couple of months either. We heard about the timing on the 1st of July. There might be then the election, first of all, of the President, the new President of the European Parliament, then the constituent meeting, then full plenary in Strasbourg.
And does the subsequent selection of the European Commission and the selection of the President of the European Parliament and all other the top jobs that exist in Europe, does that feed into the process right now, or does it feed in further down the line?
To be very frank with you, I think the negotiations have already started, even right before the elections. I think this is just in progress, a process. It's a battle that has a struggle, if you want, between different visions about the European integration process, which started a couple of months ago already and will continue, depending on the outcome we will see later tonight, whether there will be a clear lead of the EPP or of another party group. It will depend on how long maybe this battle will last, but in the end, both feel that they have the democratic argument. The EU leaders are democratically elected and the European Parliament basically represents the voters' wishes.
Christophe Garrasch, where do you stand on the same question? Do you think it's going to be as smooth, even if it's a kind of European smoothness, i.e. taking a long time and involving a lot of compromise and a lot of behind closed doors meetings? Or do you think it could altogether get a little bit more bloody, a little bit more messy?
Tout va dépendre. Je pense que, très honnêtement, si ce soir le Parti populaire européen parvient à engranger une quinzaine de sièges d'avance, ça ne veut pas dire pour autant qu'il sera le président de la Commission Juncker, puisque c'était le candidat du PPE.
It doesn't necessarily mean that we will end up with Juncker, but it is extremely likely that Juncker will be the next president of the European Commission. So 15 seats is a very solid majority, but there's a question mark hanging over as to whether
will be enough. Wouldn't it be better to have 25 seat lead? There are no written rules here. We will see this emerging over the coming weeks. We will have to see who the elected MEPs will be, how many seats the EPP will have, the Socialist Democrats.
Ce n'est qu'au terme de cette course à la présidence, c'est-à-dire qui va durer encore, à mon avis, au moins 2 bonnes semaines avant qu'on puisse y voir vraiment clair.
Okay, thank you all very much indeed for your contributions, much appreciated. And let's now take the pulse around Parliament with our roving reporter, Maria Marjorie. Maria, what's happening where you are? I can hear music.
Paul, now I am outside. I am in the Place de Luxembourg. As you can hear, there is a very strong
sound of music. This is the end of the Brussels Jazz Festival or the beginning of the celebrations?
On va partir. Okay, so now we're back with Thilo. Now, Thilo, can you tell me a bit more about what's trending on the social media?
Well, obviously at the moment what's really trending is the results. First results we've seen on Twitter, we've seen the spike. If you want to see more about results, go to our results page. It's called results-elections2014.eu. That'll be the fastest place to get all the next updates, to get the projections, the final results. Go there. What social media can give us is a bit more of a fun approach to results.
Okay, and that's definitely something I wanted to talk to you about because there is a sheep video.
Yes. Wait, just a second before the sheeps come in because I'm really proud of this chart.
Okay, leave the sheep video for a while. Keep people waiting.
Okay, everyone who's not been voting yesterday was probably watching the Champions League final. And on this screen, we see a comparison about how many people talked about the Champions League final, the winner, Real Madrid, and how many people talked about the European elections, EP 2014. And if you look at this, which is today and yesterday, you see we're doing really well.
Real Madrid and EP 2014, they're sort of trending.
We're winning.
We're
this
winning.
match we won.
Okay, great. Good to know. Good to know that people care about the elections. Now, come to the sheep video. Would you like to talk to me about the sheep video? Because obviously this is a video that the Parliament has itself put out. And it's a little bit different. It's not something maybe you would expect from the Parliament, is it?
And one of the big criticisms has always been that we don't reach young people, we don't reach young voters. One of the big things why we do social media is getting in touch with young people, and that's why we need such a video where we have a bit of a more rough approach, modern music and less commercial in a way, something that people can relate to, and I think the figures really show that it works.
Okay, well, I think we're having a few problems with bringing everyone that video, but is there anything else you can tell us about what people are really talking about?
Well...
Have you seen anything maybe a little bit humorous?
I prepared a few things humorous. Let me just switch here. Now you are taking away my final joke. Actually, this is the picture I wanted to show at the end of the night. A lot of people talk about the elections, good or bad, but what you see here is someone who said, I vote for chocolate.
Okay, lovely. Well, Thilo, I'm hearing that we now have the sheep video, so let's all watch this video.
Oh, yeah, but I was switching.
Eating and working, and he just coming to the table and jump through the window. I've done this here. A guy jumped on the street and found my car, and I have to go left
A lot of sheep. They ran over him. I was really afraid he could die.
Okay, well, I hope you guys enjoyed that video. Now, Tila will be back with us a bit later on. Now, one of the biggest jobs of the outgoing Parliament was to try and contain the fallout from the financial crisis. But as politicians tried to contain the crisis, ordinary people then suffered as unemployment skyrocketed.
Since the creation of Europe, there is more and more poverty and more people are ending up on the streets. Here things are not improving at all. Many of my friends are away in other countries working more than ever. I have been working for about 8 years abroad, but this last year the situation has really gone out of control. If we don't solve the unemployment issue, there will be no hope for the future.
Employment. I think that's the most important issue in Europe.
The party's political programs on how to tackle unemployment in Europe will be decisive for my choice of whom to vote.
There are many people begging for food and food banks are providing for them. So I don't think things are getting better.
I don't know about the rest of Europe, but in Spain things are really bad.
Time now to tackle one of the thorniest issues in the EU, unemployment. Some are worse hit than others. In Greece, 60% of young people are out of work. In Spain, it's little better. Joining me to discuss this are Bernadette Segol, Pan-European trade unionist, Giuseppe Porcaro from the European Youth Forum, Ioannis Samorgelis, Professor of Economics at the University of the Aegean, and Bettina Gola, EU Affairs Advisor at Eurozone. And also on Skype line from Portugal, we have Luísa Bastos from the Portuguese Public Employment Service. Plenty of people to really get into the substance of this terrible question, which the new Parliament will in part be confronted with from day one. Could I turn to you first of all, Bernadette Segol, just to sketch me out, I mean, I mentioned one or two things there, but sketch me out what your view as a trade unionist is of the state of employment in Europe, both for everybody but also for young people.
The state of employment is terrible. It's 26 million people unemployed, the seventh biggest country in the EU. If it was a country, precarious work has increased, poverty has increased, so that's...
and what is the cause of this in your view?
The austerity policies have been carried and they have had that result. And one cannot just say, oh, we're going to save the euro and just discard the importance of employment. So we are saying very clearly that these policies have to stop.
Bettina Gola, do you share that view that austerity is entirely to blame for it, and that's been why so many jobs have been lost in Europe?
Well, in some countries it has definitely had an impact and has shaped the way the situation is now, but what we also see as one of the causes is the skills mismatch, which is really high in some of the countries, particularly in those where youth unemployment is also very high. Employers also don't get the talent they need, so we think that really working on skills mismatch is something we have to do.
And Giuseppe, what's your take on this? I mean, we're talking about young people, a lot of young people. They talk here about the lost generation of young people. Is it the case that many of them just don't have the skills, or in your experience, is it the case that they do have skills but they can't find the work, and when they do find work, it's on parlous conditions, on poor pay and bad conditions?
Well, first of all, let me echo what Bernadette just said, that the issue of unemployment is really a catastrophe for millions and millions of young people in Europe today. And indeed, partly I can agree with what Bernadette said about the austerity measures, but indeed there is also a wider picture, a macroeconomic aspect that needs to be taken into consideration.
What is that?
Well, it has to be taken into consideration why we cannot create more jobs in Europe. That's first thing. Then, of course, there is a skill mismatch. There are quite a substantial amount of jobs that are not filled because of the kind of skills that are required in the job market, which are not fulfilled by the educational system or by the way the transition between education and employment is fulfilled. That's why, for example, at the European Youth Forum, since 2009, we are asking for better policies regarding internships, for example, and apprenticeships, and we strongly supported, together with the trade unions and other partners, a European quality charter for internships.
Let me just hold it 1 second, because I want to turn to Luísa Bastos from the Portuguese Public Employment Service. We have been referring very sort of loosely to measures which could increase the amount of employment for young people. One measure which they passed during the last term of the European Parliament was a youth guarantee scheme designed to stimulate access of young people to potential employers. Luísa Bastos, do you think this scheme works? If so, why? If not, why not?
Yeah, I think the youth guarantee will bring something good for the young people in Europe, because public employment service have to give a response to the youth unemployed person, and even those that are inactive within 4 months. So it is a great effort for the service, but it is to find a good opportunity for the young people, and we hope that with traineeships and hiring incentives and vocational training, we could, for one hand, to shorten the gap between the skills and the need of the labor market, and for the other hand to give a first opportunity, a first job opportunity for the youngsters.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. Let me bring you in, Ioannis Tsamorgelis. I mean, your country also, like many, suffers chronically. Yeah. What is the prescription for reversing that situation in Greece? I mean, it surely has to be some sort of stimulus package rather than a continuation of budget tightening measures.
You're right on that, but talking about unemployment, you have to discriminate between the macro aspect of unemployment and the micro aspect of unemployment. The macro aspect actually refers to the problem that the mix of policies that are implemented in Europe in order to overcome crisis are not the appropriate ones. Unemployment actually is a residual measure. It's a residual magnitude, comes out as what will be there, left out from the adjustments that have to be done, though it shouldn't be like that. In order to incorporate unemployment as a target and as a policy measure, then we have to implement a different kind of mix of policies, not only austerity, but along with austerity, we have to facilitate the economy through monetary measures, which we don't have actually on the table. That's the macro aspect. The micro aspect is the structural problems that have already been discussed. The mismatch of skills and also the requirements of job vacancies. And also, surely in the case of Greece and several other countries in the European Union, the absence of a liberalised, flexible labour market. That is an absolute... But haven't we seen with the liberalised, flexible, sure, but let me just put this question, don't we see the sort of double-edged sword that, that they said that a flexible labour market was the pathway to future employment opportunities?
There is no proof whatsoever that a flexible labour market is going to create jobs. It didn't work in Spain. In Spain, they lost 750,000 jobs in 2012, and they created 170,000 part-time jobs. That's not job creation. What we need to have job is a big investment plan, like we had after the Second World War, and go for that. There are millions of money which could be invested.
A challenge for the next term of the European Parliament, you think, early on, should it be? Yeah?
Absolutely.
Let me turn to you, Bettina Gola. I mean, a flexible labour market suits your organisation, doesn't it? More flexible, and the better it is for you, is it not, as somebody who represents entrepreneurs?
Well, we represent the business community, and we definitely see the advantages in some cases of a flexible labor market and flexible conditions to hire and fire people. But then, of course, I think we all realize that living in Europe, having the working standards we have is something very positive. So no rules is also not the solution. So what we think, not only a flexible labor market can in some cases help, in some cases not, but we also think that we really have to work more on the growth issue. So providing access to finance, giving loans to small companies, having a stable regulatory environment, those kind of things, so that companies, especially small companies who are the ones generating the jobs, can invest and can hire people.
Okay, we're going to cut there. There's much more to say, and I'm sorry we haven't got more time for it, but I'm going to pass over now to Mariam.
Thank you, Paul. Now it's time to leave the Parliament and head over to Dominik Kosik in Warsaw. Well, unfortunately, we're having a few technical problems there with Warsaw. But right now, let's take a look at this video.
Thousands of boxes of material later, and with hundreds of staff ready to go, the final countdown for the election battle is on. Around 3,000 potential guests and more than 1,000 journalists are expected to cram the corridors of the Brussels Parliament on election day. TV sets and live programs, this sort of festivity throws up a number of conundrums.
How many electricity plugs will we need for all the journalists and their laptops? How much electricity do we think? Is the Wi-Fi in order? Will the camera positions be right? Will the light be right? What should be the background? So all these things need to be planned well ahead and need to be bought or rented.
But what everybody is really waiting for are the results. At 11 p.m. Central European Time, the first will be released.
We have been working on this election night for 1.5 years now. With the help of exit polls, estimates and different information that will be available just after the vote, we will make a certain number of projections, and as soon as we'll have the official results, we will start counting them.
Not only is the Parliament set to go, the businesses around the corner are also poised for a hectic Sunday evening with political groups taking front row.
Yeah, it's good for the business, of course. All the events bring always people, I hope so.
If you don't feel like tearing yourself away from the couch to take part in the festivities throughout the Union, join the final round on #EP2014.
Okay, another video there telling you all about the elections. Now we're going to try back again with our correspondent in Warsaw, Dominik Kosik. Dominik, if you can hear me, what can you tell us?
Hello.
Hi, hello,
Good
welcome.
evening.
What's the mood like where you are?
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
I've got our special guest, former commissioner, EU commissioner and MEP, number 1 on the Warsaw list of Platform Civic, Mrs. Danuta Hübner. Good afternoon. I wanted to ask you what will be, in your opinion, the main goals for the next term of the European Parliament? A fight with unemployment, especially between young people?
Well, I think certainly growth and unemployment, that's issue number 1. But I also think that in the foreign policy we will have to find a platform to coexist with Russia. I also think that we will have to continue the reforms, deepening the Eurozone integration and make everything possible to avoid the division in Europe Euro versus non-Euro member states. And I also think that the energy and the common energy policy and the energy union, this will be, I think, for some years to come, an important discussion looking for the best solution that would increase security and also competitiveness of Europe energy-wise. Yeah.
And the continuing of the fight with the recession, with crisis, on which way should we fight?
Well, I think we have to be fully aware of the fact that we are not aiming at having the same growth factors now that we had before the crisis hit. It's clearly now we have to look for and invest more in the new growth factors, and certainly the most important one will be the digital agenda and the completion of the digital internal market, because this is the sector which will grow fastest globally and also in Europe, and where we can have, we need a lot of people with digital qualifications, and this is also the young generation that is having those qualifications. I think through digital internal market we can address the youth unemployment in the most effective way. Of course, we will need a lot of special programs which we already established, using the social fund, using the youth employment initiative, using the Erasmus Plus program. But I think growth is fundamental, and that's why internal market, digital agenda, but also the service directive, maybe a new directive to really exploit the potential of service sector in terms of creating new employment. I guess these are the areas where we will have to act fast.
Yes, I just wanted to ask you about kind of the way of the fight with unemployment, especially between young people in Southern Europe, in Spain, in Italy, in Portugal. In Poland, we don't have such a big problem like in Southern Europe.
Well, we don't have such a big problem, but the problem does exist because, like nearly everywhere in Europe, the youth among the unemployment among the young people is double. They are much more at risk of unemployment than the elderly generation, the older generation, and that's why for us it's also a challenge. And we have a lot of, I think, programs which are specifically targeting the young people, not only European ones that I mentioned, but also nationally. The Ministry of Labour is also having many programs and projects for the young people, helping them also financially to start a new job. So I think we need to continue this well-orchestrated effort at all levels of European governance, including local and regional level. But as I said, I think also the general support for growth and for the new growth factors like the digitalization of the single market, this is something that should also parallelly be taken seriously, because that's what young people are good at. They have clearly a competitive advantage in digital qualifications, so that's where they can,
okay,
I think,
Dominica,
find the
we're going to have to leave it there, but of course we will continue to keep checking in with all of our correspondents around all the capitals later on in the programme. I'm going to pass it back to Paul.
I'm really sorry. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Merci, au revoir.
Early unemployment, and so I'd like to go around the table, and we've talked about some of the root causes of the levels of unemployment here. I mean, not everybody agrees, that's to be expected, but could I ask you, and perhaps I'll just go around the table, left to right, where you think the jobs of the future are going to come from?
Well, there are many sectors that are really growing, very dynamic, very interesting. If you just think about everything connected to biotechnology or ICT, I think the challenge is that we translate the opportunities also for smaller businesses so that they can also profit from such growth.
Giuseppe, can I ask you next? I mean, it's not a case that, young people have increasingly more access to education. So we were talking about the skills shortage earlier, but there's a lot of young people out there who have got modern, industry-relevant education, and yet the jobs aren't there for them. Where do you think the jobs are going to come from in order to absorb this number of people who are coming out with decent skills?
Well, I can echo Bettina about those growing new sectors that are over there and so on. But let me say something. I think that whatever kind of jobs we are getting in the future, they are going to be European jobs. And what I think is that the next mandate of the European Parliament should take seriously in order to push the Council and the Commission for a real union of the labour market legislation. Because without a real European labour market legislation, which is blocked at the national level at the moment, we are not getting any kind of framework in order to get those jobs for the future.
That's a very strong message to the incoming Parliament, and I'm afraid we don't have time for any more. I do apologise about that, but it's over to you now, Mariam. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul, and thanks for apologising to our guests. Now, let's head back to our roving reporter around the Parliament, Maria. Last time she was outside the Parliament. Maria, where are you now?
Mariam, I am just outside the Parliament in the famous Esplanade, and here is the Place de Luxembourg, where all the main political parties booked a bar where they are waiting for the final results. And here I am with 3 young voters, let's say like that, who are following the election. So who will be for President of the Commission for you?
For me, the President of the Commission, for me, I hope it's good. It's going to be Schulz, but it's very rare to happen, but we'll see.
Why?
Well, because everybody's talking about Lagarde these days, at least in Brussels. So we'll see.
Yes, the current director of the International
IMF,
Monetary Fund.
Yeah.
And you, who are you supporting?
I voted for the Green Party. But I don't think they have a real candidate for the Commission. But I think on a European level, the Green Party is very important. That's why for Europe, I vote Green.
Good. And the third one, are you supporting somebody? What are you expecting from these European elections?
Well, I also support Martin Schulz because I hope that he really makes the process more transparent and that he shifts Europe more closely to people, that the things are not discussed behind closed doors, but that also people in all the countries can take part and can follow the processes and decisions.
Good. And so I remember also that there is a musical festival. There is a musical festival behind, so these young voters are following elections.
Maria, do keep
and
us
music live. This is why the sound is so strong. Mariam.
Well, I'm glad you're enjoying the music there, Maria. Now, of course, there was a Green supporter there saying that the Green Party has no real candidate for the Commission. Strong words there, and also there was a supporter for Martin Schulz. Now, let's move on now. Does Europe have the right strategy? Let's take a look at this video.
With whether we've got a guest. Because what we're doing is we've spent the last 2 hours.
Okay, well, we seem to be having We seem to be having a few technical problems. Maria, what more can you tell us from where you are?
Paris.
Okay, well, it seems we're not going to go to Maria, but let's now go to Paris and to Chloe Fabre. Chloe, what's the latest from Paris?
Oui, ça part. Hello, Mariam. So, with 25%, the Front National claimed to be the first political party here in France, and it can change a lot of things in view of the presidential election for 2017. FN might be able to get rid of one of the 2 traditional parties, UMP and What do you think about this score? Vous, en tant que pensez-vous de ce score?
Écoutez, d'abord, moi, en tant que démocrate et femme du centre, je me réjouis de notre score, si vous me le permettez. Nous faisons un peu plus de 10%. Et dans ce climat-là, c'est vraiment très, très bien. Et c'est un pari réussi. Nous avons constitué ce courant politique du centre il y a très, très peu de temps. Avec
Okay, well, unfortunately, we are having a few technical problems there. Let's now go to the Hemicycle and see what's happening there.
We are witnessing an historic moment because for the first time since 1979, the long-term trend of declining turnout has been reversed. May I ask our technical team to launch the projection, please? 43.11. But I insist this is a provisional estimate for the European turnout. Je vais maintenant aussi demander à mes collègues de la technique de lancer les estimations de turnout pays par pays, et puis un petit peu plus tard, une carte de l'Europe qui va vous montrer aussi les niveaux de participation des citoyens d'un point de vue géographique. Et puis, rendez-vous à partir de 22h ou 22h10 pour la première projection des sièges pour toute l'institution. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. See you in a while. Please.
Okay, we just saw the Parliament spokesperson there announcing that there has been a 43.1% turnout for these elections. That's good stuff there. Well, now it's back over to Paul.
I think that Ukrainians are able to deal with their own problems by themselves, and I'm against the demonization of Russia, which, just like Europe, is interested in close collaboration with Ukraine. I think that by revolving the debate around image of the Cold War, we are not trying to really understand what is happening there, and I find it hard to understand why there is all this violence. If we opt for Europe and want to improve the functioning of Europe, and also if we think about the initial goal of Europe, it was to create a unified Europe, so with more powers on the international stage, even including an international intervention force. I think that Europe first needs to concentrate on internal affairs because it is becoming very big, and I think it would be a good idea to put the focus back on itself and not on world politics.
A quick reminder, you're watching a special election broadcast from Europarl TV in the European Parliament. At this juncture, we're about an hour from the official announcement of results. We're also expecting statements from group leaders soon. More of the latest from Mariam in just a moment. But right here, we're going to look out now, not in, to Europe's external relations. Shaken by events in Crimea and Ukraine, paralysed, some say, over Syria. To many, it looks like a gigantic, directionless muddle. Joining us now are Nicolas Gros, a journalist and blogger and an expert, as I believe, on Russian affairs, and also Davis Lewin from the UK think tank, the Henry Jackson Society. I hope, perhaps, we also have on the Skype line from Kiev, Sergio Cantone, Euronews correspondent there. Why? Because presidential elections have been taking place there. We'll kick off with you, Sergio, if you're there. Can you hear me okay? Do we have the connection with Kiev? We don't have Kiev right now, so let's start with our guest. One of the things that was perhaps exceptional about Kiev is that these elections have taken place in the first place, but also that President Putin, who's spent a lot of his time in the past few months being accused of meddling maliciously in Ukrainian affairs, has said that he would respect the outcome of the elections. Nicolas Gros, can I ask you first of all, do you think that Mr. Putin, President Putin, can be taken for his word and that he will respect the outcome of the elections? And do you also think, if that's the case, that something can happen in Ukraine that's been conspicuously absent, which is the beginning of talks?
I think Putin respects his word in words, and in act it could be different. It is also policy of Putin. He has an objective. The objective is not to invade Ukraine, but to keep Ukraine so close that he could on Moscow. And it is his objective. On the words, as not very important, I think.
So you think there's an ongoing process of destabilization in order to continue to control? And what is the advantage there?
I think the mistake of the European Union is to don't care to this willingness. It is very important. And when you have this willingness from Moscow, it is not just words. They want to act also to respect this policy, this weakness.
I'll come to you, Davis, in just one second, but we have also on Skype Michael Lee from the German Marshall Fund of the United States. Very warm welcome, Michael Lee. Thanks a lot for joining us from Germany. Could I ask you first, Germany, as we know, is a country with massive investments in Russia and a proximity that not everybody else in the European Union has to Russia. Do you share that view that, that President Putin is out long-term to destabilize Ukraine and that he may not be capable of being taken at his word?
I don't think the goal is necessarily to destabilize Ukraine. He wants to prevent Ukraine joining the Western club, obviously NATO, but also even the association agreement with the EU. So I think his main objective has been that, and destabilization, if you wish, is a means to attain that end.
What do you think on the question that the European Union has been hopelessly divided on how to deal with President Putin and Ukraine?
Basically, the EU has agreed on the fundamental strategy, which was 5 years of negotiation for an association agreement. All 28 member states were agreed about signing that. And they still agree that the new government in Ukraine's priority should be to implement this agreement. The problems arise mainly when people talk about what kind of response should be made to the most recent events, where you have countries like Poland and the Baltic states in particular in favor of tougher sanctions, and others such as Germany in favor of a more diplomatic approach.
Stay on the line. Thanks very much indeed for that, Michael Lee from Germany. Let me turn to you now, Davis, for your perspectives very briefly on the Russian question before we turn to other pressing foreign policy issues.
Well, I mean, talk about the failure of EU foreign policy. What EU foreign policy? This is a grave disaster because essentially the conflict with Russia is about setting the so-called line in the sand about the values. Are you going to be with the values where the people get to choose, or are you going to be with the values where the people are under the yoke of, call them a dictator, call them what you will, a kleptocracy, whatever you want. And we have failed bitterly. Bitterly on the European level, bitterly also on the national level, and it will come back to haunt us very severely because these things have effects long-term in a way that will harm Europe grievously.
We've got a new European Parliament coming up, Nicolas Gros. We'll also have a new Commission. What initiatives should Europe take henceforth in?
I think it is very simple. Do you want the war with Russia? Economical war, not only maybe a real war, or do you want to have normal relation with Russia? And I think the best solution is to have a dialogue with Russia on Ukraine. It is the reality now that we arrive. And the best solution is to propose the dialogue to Russia. It is better that to have a dialogue with Russia and impose the dialogue, Russia impose the dialogue to Europe.
Okay, let's leave it there on the Russian-Ukrainian question. Michael Lee in Germany, could I ask you, do you believe that Europe has somehow lost its way in its relationship with Syria? I beg your pardon, we don't have Michael Lee on the line anymore. Well, let me put this question to you, Davis Lewin. Do you believe that Europe has lost its way on its relationship with the Arab Spring countries and lost its focus on what to do on Syria?
If I may, here's the fundamental problem. Foreign policy requires leadership. Europe has clearly shown itself to be a setup that doesn't want strong leadership on foreign policy. Look at the people that have been elected to run foreign policy here. Foreign policy is directed from the capitals, and it has failed as such to act with the strength that it could act in.
What about the idea
affairs.
that European Union is all about the projection of soft power, and soft power can work?
Forgive me, if you look at Bashar al-Assad's method, I don't think we're talking about soft power here. We're talking about
negotiation.
The application of hard power, perhaps coercive negotiations, but not soft power.
Okay, Michael Lee in Germany is back on the line with us. Let me put this same question to you, Michael Lee. Do you think that the European Union has somehow lost its way over Syria and lost its focus in terms of its relationship with the countries of the Arab Spring? Hello, Michael Lee, can you hear me okay? Could you hear that question? Okay. Okay, good. It seems that Michael Lee can't hear us in Germany. I apologise for that. Let me put that same question
on
to you,
Syria,
Nicolas.
I think I'm not agree, because this is not a failure of the European Union. It is a failure of international community, because the United States, we couldn't say that United States are the soft power, hard power. The failure of United States on Syria, it is a big failure. It is a big failure, and I think it is a real problem. For Syria, it is not a problem for European Union. It is a general problem for the international community.
If we are going to make it about a failure of the United States, then we have to acknowledge that Europe has been eating for free off the United States security exports in the global international order. And as Bob Gates, the former Defense Secretary of the United States, said when he left office, this cannot continue. The Europeans have to have the ability to exercise influence. They have to have the ability to exercise hard power in order to put, even if you want to negotiate with Putin, and I have to say what you lay out to me sounds more like appeasement than negotiations, but if you're going to negotiate, this is a man, I mean, it's Vladimir Putin. You don't negotiate without the hard power to assert yourself if your negotiations fail. So I think there's a grave failure across Europe. If the countries don't want it, if Germany, France, Britain don't want it, fine. Then let's be clear about the consequences. But currently, the way that the setup works, we have no credibility and therefore aren't playing the positive role that Europeans could be playing in international affairs.
Nicolas Gros, we'll come to you back in a second, but let's just hold that thought. And let's go over to Mariam now to discuss the polls with Philippe Lamberts.
Thank you very much, Paul. Now, as Paul was saying, I have Green MEP Philippe Lamberts. Thank you for joining us on the programme. And of course, Natalia is back with us. So what can you tell us? I mean, right now, 10 p.m, we've got the first projections based on real results. So Natalia, I'll come to you first, ladies first, if you don't mind, Mr. Lambert. What can you tell us about what we're seeing?
Well, we don't have the first projections yet, but what we do have is the first European figure for the turnout. And here we see a major breakthrough as compared to previous European elections. 43% of the European electorate voted in 2009, 43.11%, which is almost the same figure, voted in these elections. It's the first time that there is no decrease.
There's no decrease, that's a good thing. Is it, in your opinion, is that a good thing? I mean, this isn't a very big increase, is it?
I wouldn't call that a breakthrough. I think that the fact that we have a stable participation rate is maybe a sign that the tide has been turned. But I mean, only 43% of Europeans turning out for this election means that most of them do not realize how important the decisions that are taken at European level are in shaping their lives. So there's still a ways to go in order to increase this.
So, Mr. Hammett, what would you say in general is happening here? Is there still a sense of voter apathy going on? Why are people not getting out to vote? I mean, obviously in 2014, we've seen we've been talking about social media. There's been lots of campaigning. I mean, if you look around the Parliament itself, there are stages up. I mean, it seems to be a lot of people pushing to get people out to vote, but they're not actually doing it.
No, exactly. And my feeling is that there's an increasing distrust about democracy across Europe. That people may have a feeling that, well, whatever they do, wherever they show up or not, whether they vote for this party or that party, it won't change anything. And that is what we need to rebuild. I really take tonight's results as yet another sign that we have a significant work to do in order to restore the credibility of democracy, not just of some parties, but of democracy in the eyes of most of our citizens.
And so, if I ask you, how is your election going?
Well, I don't know yet. I don't
have
any
yet,
results.
But you must have some sort of indication.
Absolutely not. My party in Belgium is receding right now. It's below the 10%. But I still believe that the European result will be different for the French-speaking Greens than they are at federal and regional level. Because, well, these are the results that we have. We have all three elections at the same time in Belgium. And I still believe that we will surprise people with our European results.
And talk to me a bit about rumours of alliances. Are we going to have a sort of coalition between ALDE, Greens, GUE and S&D? I mean, what are we looking at in terms of
Well, frankly
coalition?
speaking, I would certainly be a buyer for such an alliance. But so far, what I've seen from S&D is that, well, they have a vested preference for aligning themselves with the EPP and with the Liberals if they need a third partner. That's basically how they have been behaving the last 20-some years in the European Parliament. Now, maybe, just maybe, will Schulz surprise us this time over. But frankly speaking, I didn't see any signs in that direction yet.
So if you had to put your money on one particular group, which group do you think is actually going to pip the other one to the post? Is it going to be the Social Democrats or European People's Party?
Well, I believe EPP is poised to remain the first group in the European Parliament, but well, I may be wrong, I don't know. But that's my gut feeling.
Okay, lovely. Now we'll be back. Thank you so much, Mr. Lambert
pleasure.
and Natalia. Now we'll be back with Natalia later on, but now let's go back to Paul.
Thanks very much indeed, Mariam. I'm still here with my two guests discussing European foreign policy questions. Nicolas Gros, journalist and blogger, Davis Lewin from the UK think tank, the Henry Jackson Society. Let me ask you, first of all, Nicolas, to think big and tell me what the big foreign policy priorities are going to be for the European Union in the next parliamentary term.
There are a lot of priority because this is a lot
Pick out the biggest ones.
Yeah, it's a lot of crises around Europe. But I think the real challenge for not also European Union but also the member country, it is the defense. Because all the countries spend for defense, each country, but together they spend very low. And this is they have to find a solution.
Okay, good. Let me hold you there because the line that we thought we had at the beginning to Kiev that we didn't have has now emerged. And on the line, I hope now, is Sergio Cantone, Euronews correspondent in Kiev. Why are we doing this? Because it's also presidential elections in Kiev. Sergio Cantone, we know there are a lot of candidates there. Perhaps you can just give us the latest from these elections.
Yeah, I can give you the latest from this election. I would like to precise, sorry to say that, but I'm at the moment in Donetsk because, as you know, the crisis, the political crisis is hitting hard, especially in the east of the country. Anyway, what's going on? It's a landslide victory for the candidate, Petro Poroshenko, who is this oligarch and chocolate maker. And there is a surprise result, a negative result for Yulia Tymoshenko. She didn't get as many votes as she expected.
So it's not going to go to a runoff?
No, most probably.
Okay, and Sergio,
this is the first round done. We have a new president in Ukraine.
Okay, and tell us, Sergio, both where Mr. Poroshenko stands and how he's likely to relate both to Ukrainians and to Russia.
Well, that's his biggest challenge. We must say, first of all, that Poroshenko, Mr. Poroshenko, as I said, is a businessman, a huge businessman, a very efficient manager and a chocolate maker. And Russia, as for many other Ukrainian economic activities, is anyway the recipient of Ukrainian export, as well as for Mr. Poroshenko. Mr. Poroshenko used to have a lot of contacts with Russia for economic reasons, for business reasons, and also because he owns some factories of chocolate in Russia.
Sorry to interrupt you, but is Mr. Putin going to want to talk to him and to believe that he would find in Mr. Poroshenko a valuable partner for discussions?
The policy of the Kremlin at the moment vis-à-vis Ukraine looks much more as a kind of sphinx. It's very difficult to understand who could be the politician Putin would be willing to talk to.
Do we have...
He said... Yeah.
Do we have any sense of where Mr. Poroshenko's politics lie? Is he pro-Ukrainian, pro-Russian, somewhere in the middle?
No, Mr. Poroshenko is by tradition a very pro-Western politician. Also his style is like that. Remind that he became such a successful candidate, even thanks to the step down of Vitaly Klitschko, because they decided to share the power to do a kind of ticket.
Just one final thought, Sergio. Yeah. Do you think this election is the election which will kickstart the so far absent talks process, either directly between Ukraine and Russia or between Ukrainians themselves?
Well, between Ukrainians themselves is quite important. Now, the problem for any government in Kyiv is, first of all, to talk to the eastern part of Ukraine, because the two parts don't understand each other, not at all. There have been mistakes from both sides. Now, Russia is using these mistakes for its own political purposes. They don't want to lose Ukraine, and to have this kind of instability in the east is allowing an external agent to control and influence the whole of the country.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much indeed, Sergio. I appreciate this update on the election night in Kiev. We're going to have to wind up our conversation on the EU's external relations at the moment. It's a shame that we don't have time to go on, but I'm afraid we don't. And I'm going to pass over to Mariam now. Thank you.
Thank you again, Paul. Now it seems that green is the colour of the moment. We just had Green MEP Philip Lambert, and Maria, our roving reporter around the Parliament, has Green MEP Butikova. Maria, over to you.
Yes, Mariam, I'm now again inside where we are already commenting on this turnout rate in all different countries at the European level. So I'm here with Mr. Butikova, who is a German member of the Green group. First of all, let's start with this turnout rate. 43.1% is more, even more than 2009, but it's almost the same. It depends on who these people vote for. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I think it's great news that the numbers stopped sliding. Everybody was so gloomy in the run-up to the election, expecting that maybe participation rate would fall below 40%, in a way sort of undercutting the legitimacy of the parliament. It's slightly going in the positive direction. Still, I think it's good. And if you look at the member states, it's clear that in some member states participation rose considerably. And interestingly, if I'm not mistaken, in those countries where there were more public debates between the leading candidates, the participation was better. So maybe that is a hint as to how we should run election campaigns in the future.
But as I was saying, a lot of these votes goes to Eurosceptical parties. Doesn't it worry you?
Well, sure it worries me. It worries me that the Ukrainian people voted more strictly against their own extremists than the rest of Europe. And in some of the countries, the numbers are really scary. But I'm not here to sort of preach being afraid. I'm here to say, let's take it on and let's show that there's a better way for Europe than what these extremists and populists have to offer.
Thank you very much. Mariam, back to you.
Maria, well, now finally we're going to go over to one of our other capitals. We're going over to Berlin to our correspondent, Andreas Dietel. Guten Abend, Andreas. What have you got?
Good evening, Mariam. Yeah, well, now it's quite calm here in the headquarters of the Social Democrat Party. Earlier on, people had reasons to chill. Now it's one of the first hot summer days here in the capital of Germany, and people have moved outside to celebrate in the many outdoors cafes what they were earlier cheering on.
Okay,
there were several reasons for them to cheer, actually. That we heard the first cheers when the first preliminary election results came in. The Social Democrat Party has gained more than 7% over its last result, which was historically bad. And then, of course, we heard more cheering when people learned about the election turnout, which has gone up by 5% in Germany over the last elections. And the last and strongest cheers were, of course, when Martin Schulz came in here. I think people attribute this victory very much to him personally. He was accompanied by the party president, Sigmar Gabriel, and yeah, people were holding up these signs here, which read, "Jetzt ist Schulz." That roughly translates as, well, it's enough now, it's time for a change, but also it's time for Martin Schulz to become Commission President. I think this sums pretty much up the expectations that people around here had.
Okay, lovely. Thank you so much, Andreas. We'll be back with him a lot later. But right now, I have Thilo, our social media expert, with me. So, Thilo, what more can you tell us? What are people talking about?
Well, obviously we don't have clear results yet, so most political leaders are careful in any bold statements. The big good news that we have so far, here for example you see it from EPP leader Jean-Claude Juncker, the downward trend in participation has been stopped.
Well, I guess that is a good thing. I mean, it's not a very big, you know, hasn't gone up so much, but yeah, I guess he's right there.
Let me show you on some other maps. Here's a short overview. We just published this on our election blog. So if you're interested, you can go there and see it really in detail. And I think one of the reasons, at least as a social media manager, I hope that the turnaround happened this year might have been also social media. I just gave you one example here.
Right.
This is the Twitter page of a German account.
Germany, yeah. Okay.
And you see election topics have been trending. And we see the same thing in many European countries. Trending on Twitter means basically a lot of people talk about this. And we have not only seen this in Twitter, we also saw this example on Google, on Facebook. There were a lot of initiatives there.
Of course, there's the Google image, isn't there? When you click on Google, you see that sign of getting people to vote.
Let me see.
Yeah, there
this
it is.
one.
That's the one we're talking about.
Exactly. So there were many reminders out there in the online world and the virtual world telling people, go to vote. But obviously, as you can tell, not everyone is happy. Here's an image I just saw commenting on the elections.
What's this? This is Alien
the alien.
Predators?
35 years ago, Scott.
What's this got to do with the elections? Explain it.
Well, it obviously means that not everyone is happy with the results.
Right.
And if we look on a bit, we can see here, for example, that the debate is still very much focused on some countries now. But the thing is...
Seeing there, 2220, the spike has gone down.
Yeah, there was the first big news at 8 o'clock, and now everyone is lying low and
They may be
waiting for
gone
the
to
final
have a
results.
coffee and energize themselves
Might
again.
be a good idea because it might still take a bit longer.
Okay, lovely. We'll be back with Thilo a little bit later. But now time to go back to Athens. Kalispera George, what more can you tell us there? Now, George should have Alexis Tsipras with him.
Okay,
well, we seem...
Can you hear me from Athens?
Yes, we can.
Oui, alors, oui, ici à Athènes, ça se confirme de nouveau. La victoire de SYRIZA, on parle même de 4 points de différence avec la démocratie nouvelle. Nous avons avec nous le numéro 2 du parti de SYRIZA, M. Panos Kourletis, c'est le porte-parole de SYRIZA, qui va faire via le TV la première réaction officielle de SYRIZA.
Thank you for being with us. What is your first reaction for your percentage? The result is a clear and a major victory for SYRIZA, a left-wing party. At the same time, it is a clear rejection of the Samaras government because of the policy they have implemented, which was the most callous antisocial policies that have been implemented in Greece for many decades. Until now, the SYRIZA party has been saying that if there was a clear victory in relation to the coalition of New Democracy and PASOK, they would ask for elections. Mr. Skourletis, I think that objectively it is the beginning of such a course, because there is a clear lack of correspondence between the policies of the government and this result. A clear lack of correspondence. So there's no more legitimacy for this government to deal with questions like the Greek debt, questions that we will have to deal with for decades. They have no legitimacy. They've lost the elections. They have to admit it. So it is clear that our people should have their say, because the balance of powers at the national level has changed.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Brussels.
Okay, lovely. That was George there in Athens, and they were talking there about the balance of power in Greece. Now, moving on to one of our other themes. Now, projections show gains for the far-right parties, and there was no escaping the issue of immigration this parliamentary term.
It's a delicate issue which the European Union has to deal with, because it's not okay that certain northern European countries don't listen to the problems of southern European countries, in particular Greece, Italy and Spain, which are most affected by illegal immigration. I'm in favor of closing our borders. We need more border controls in every country to prevent illegal immigration. We have to slow down these migration waves, which in the end Europe doesn't benefit from.
A lot of people tend to forget that some of the nation's strongest institutions, like the NHS, were built off the back of immigration. So it's almost hypocritical to say at this point, well, we've had too much.
Thanks very much, Mariam. Immigration, legal and illegal, was never far from anyone's lips during this campaign. It's among the most divisive issue in Europe. How to advance on this burning question. I'm hoping our next guests will be able to help us answer that. Davis Lewin from the UK think tank, the Henry Jackson Society, is still with us, and we're joined by Karl Kopp, Director of European Affairs at the refugee rights organisation Pro Asyl. Let's pick up from some of the words at the very beginning of those vox pops that we heard just now. I'll start with you, Karl Kopp. Northern Europe doesn't listen to Southern Europe. Southern Europe has the problem and the burden to bear. There's an issue there that needs to be dealt with, isn't there?
Yeah, there is an issue, but it's an issue of there is a lack of solidarity within the EU concerning refugee reception. So we have still an unfair system shifting the responsibility from the center or the north to the southern countries. But on the other hand, there is no common position of the EU member states to create legal and safe ways to Europe. For example, the Syrian refugee crisis, we have less than 100,000 asylum seekers from Syria, but 2.5 million and more live outside Syria. So the most of the refugees live in Lebanon or Turkey, and Europe is not ready to create a common, concerted, solidarity-based reception admission program for refugees.
But isn't there that at least in principle, the idea of solidarity and burden sharing, isn't there that in principle it should be a short leap to those member states which aren't accepting refugees or aren't accepting many refugees to begin to implement that?
There is no system. Okay, we have the term solidarity is very crucial in the treaties, but there is no solidarity-based system concerning asylum seekers in Europe. And what we need is first to give a clear message to the southern countries, we support you, but stick to the human rights. Don't push people back.
Okay, let's just hold that there, because we're just about to play a short video clip of the French National Front leader, Marine Le Pen, speaking in the European Parliament at the height of the boat people crisis in the Mediterranean last year. This is what she had to say.
From the moment that you let these men and women believe that if they manage to set foot on European land, they will be saved, they will attempt the journey, and you will be personally responsible for the deaths thrown along the route. The extreme right is growing across the EU, including in my country. We are in favor of defending a Europe which can be identified by its values, and now it's the time to do this. If we leave it for tomorrow or the day after, it will be too late.
Davis Lewin, you heard Marine Le Pen there. Many people have accused Marine Le Pen and other right-wing politicians of using the whole illegal immigration question to their political advantage, turning on the European Union. What's your take on that?
Well, let us take stock. It's a pretty grave day, given Marine Le Pen's success, when we talk about the values of Europe. But we must be honest with ourselves and ask ourselves why these successes are happening. And it is not just far-right parties. It is also parties that are not extremist in that sense, that have immigration as their main issue. Now, why is that? It's because over decades, there has been a failure by the center of the political spectrum on the left and on the right to manage the issue of immigration properly. And let us be very clear, immigration, economic migration and so on and so forth is not asylum. Asylum is a very specific aspect, a humanitarian aspect of something. But when you have a broader system that is unable to manage, even just in terms of as simple as counting people in and out, working out where people are coming from, controlling the flow, you could decide to have open borders, but you'd still have to have a system whereby you are able to tell who's coming into your country and what they're doing. It has failed very gravely, and what we've had is this kind of promises and promises to electorates that are not racist, that are not illegitimate in their demands, to see their countries and the character of their countries, which is changing. It doesn't matter if you want to be the most multicultural person in the world, you have to be realistic about the experience of the voters across Europe. That's why this is happening.
Carl Kopp, let me bring you in there. Do you think, bearing in mind what Davis Lewin is saying and the results that we're seeing so far in the elections, that inevitably there will have to be changes to European Union immigration policy?
Okay, we want a new start. We want a real common asylum system in Europe. We want a system to give these people legally and safe ways, offer them safe ways to Europe. We don't want to have additional, no more death at the European borders. During the last 14 years, more than 23,000 refugees died at European borders. And we want to stop this. And if you follow the agenda of the populists, if we copy and paste this, like many traditional parties have done, then you will lose. And you will also lose the soul and the principles, the European principles, refugee rights, human rights, stand up for them. This is maybe one consequence of this sad day.
Let me just ask you a question, sort of take that point or expand that point a little bit. I mean, the idea is that Europe ought to have set up humanitarian corridors which would give potential asylum seekers or people who are fleeing war a place of refuge, much as they did over Kosovo and Afghanistan when hundreds of thousands of people arrived in Europe, albeit temporarily. Yeah. Is the case now, because that humanitarian corridor isn't in place over Syria, that today's people fleeing war become tomorrow's illegal immigrants and also run the risk of dying while they try and get away?
Die in the Aegean or in the Mediterranean, the Syrians. We want to support them, show solidarity. At the moment we campaign together with ECRA, our European umbrella organization. The slogan is Europe Act Now. Now is very late, 3 years after the beginning of the war, to find legal ways for them concerning the visa restriction, very unbureaucratic ways to bring them legally out of Lebanon, Egypt, Libya, not to force them to go these dangerous ways, to broaden and increase the admission programs, the resettlement programs, and to find ways, unbureaucratic
Carl Kopp, I'm going to have to wind you up there.
Just family members.
Okay, hold that thought there, because we're going to cut to the Hemicycle now, and Mariam, you're going to take us there.
Exactly. As Paul was saying, we're now going to cut to the Hemicycle, so let's take you all there and see what's happening in there.
President, you have the floor. D'abord, permettez-moi de vous saluer cette soirée électorale. Mais avant de commencer, je voudrais exprimer mes sincères condoléances aux familles des victimes de la tuerie survenue hier au musée juif de Bruxelles. C'est un acte abominable qui nous montre une fois encore où les extrémistes peuvent mener. Et je crois qu'il faut continuer toujours à nous battre pour protéger nos valeurs de tolérance, de respect, de liberté, d'expression, de pensée et aussi de culte. Et il est regrettable que dans une journée comme celle-là, nous devons commencer par ces mots tristes et ces sincères condoléances aux familles. Je voudrais vous dire un mot. Nous avons enrayé l'abstention. C'était vraiment un de nos soucis principaux en disant en termes de démocratie, bien sûr ce n'est pas parfait, bien sûr nous ne sommes pas satisfaits, mais au moins c'est la première fois où nous avons enrayé l'abstention. Le deuxième point, si je regarde l'estimation, mais une estimation reste toujours une estimation, donc moi je reste toujours très prudent, mais ça veut dire que le PPE arrivera en tête et proposera donc son candidat qui est Jean-Claude Juncker comme président de la Commission. Les gens ont voté pour la responsabilité et la stabilité. Nous avons eu beaucoup de soucis pendant cette campagne électorale, je crois qu'il faut le dire. Nous avons eu beaucoup de choses qui se sont mêlées, emmêlées et empêtrées. Une chose est certaine, c'est que le PPE, qui est la force politique responsable en Europe, qui est aussi le gardien d'une Europe ouverte et sûre, et le PPE se tient aux côtés de ceux qui créent des emplois, et dans les différents pays, et notamment dans les pays, et je cite ce soir, je suis très content, en Lettonie, notre ami Dombrovskis, qui a pris ce pays dans une situation très difficile, mais qui l'a remonté très vite, et dont les électeurs ont fait une confiance nouveau à notre ami Dombrovskis, et je crois que c'est une très bonne chose. Je suis déjà trop long?
Non, ça va.
Non, non, je les regarde parce qu'on m'a dit très très court.
Party Chairman Joseph
Alors, si
Daul
vous avez
there
à poser des questions,
in the Hemicycle, and of course wearing his vote for Juncker badge. Well, now we're going to cross over to Paris and back to Chloe. Chloe, who do you have with you?
Hello, Mariam. I'm with Jean-Marie Cavada, who should be elected for the Centrist Party as an MEP. Yeah. Votre score, Monsieur Cavada, pour votre formation politique, 10%, c'est mieux qu'en 2009. Alors qu'on dit souvent que les élections européennes sont de la politique nationale en France, est-ce que vous diriez que vous avez bénéficié d'un vote d'adhésion?
On a bénéficié surtout du travail qu'on a fait, c'est-à-dire se découvrir et se montrer comme les vrais Européens que nous sommes, c'est-à-dire ceux qui veulent la construction de l'instrument européen et la réorientation de sa politique.
Et je vais quand même vous demander une petite réaction au score du Front National, 25%. Vous, en tant que démocrate, qu'est-ce que vous en pensez?
Je pense que la maladie et la gangrène du déclin français produisent ses effets. Ceux qui connaissent l'histoire se souviendront qu'il y a quelque chose de 1956 dans ce pays. C'était Pierre Poujade et la Ligue contre les impôts à l'époque. Il y a un vaste mouvement de protestation parce que le pays manque de respiration politique, parce que quelques scandales comme dans beaucoup d'autres, hélas, et puis surtout parce que la lutte contre le chômage ne fonctionne pas et la question de l'immigration n'est pas très clairement traitée. Or, pour moi, c'est une question qui est ressortie de l'autorité européenne, c'est-à-dire de la compétence communautaire et pas des compétences nationales qui ont produit le désastre qu'on voit en France notamment.
J'aimerais partir au niveau européen. Votre candidat à la présidence de la Commission, Guy Verhofstadt,
European level, Guy Verhofstadt is your candidate to be president of the Commission. He is federalist. Do you think that helped your score of 10%?
Simple fédéraliste, c'est exactement le contraire de, je dirais, le jacobinisme multiplié par l'administration présente partout, la suradministration. Et je pense que ça nous a aidé en effet parce que Guy Verhofstadt est d'abord un ami en qui j'ai confiance dans les idées que j'ai confiance.
Is a friend. I believe in his ideas. He is a clear speaker, a frank speaker. He is saying that you need clear governance, and the European Union should only deal with those issues that member states cannot tackle alone because they don't have the wherewithal. So that is what we are striving for when we talk about a federalist governance in Europe.
Et la défense et l'énergie notamment.
Energy would be one such point. So UDI and Modem candidates or MEPs will join the ALDE group in the European Parliament. Yes, thank you.
Back to you, Mariam. Thank you.
Thank you, Chloe. Well, now in the studio with me, on my side of the studio, I have Professor Kading. Professor Kading, thank you for being on my side of the studio finally.
Good evening. Yes, hello. Welcome.
Thank you. Now, we do have finally the first projections based on real results are in. We were expecting them, of course, at 10 p.m, a little bit later, but let's take a look then. Guide me through what we're looking at here and which parties are sort of taking the lion's share of the vote.
Yes, what you can clearly see is that there are clear losses for the European People's Party in comparison to 2009.
Yep.
And there are also, slight losses for the S&D. So the centre is really pretty much squeezed, if you want, then between the...
But we're still seeing, of course, that the EPP is projected to be the lead party, you could say, in the Parliament, with the S&D again coming second.
For the time being, but you see the difference between the EPP and S&D is not that big. It's not the 30 seats everyone is talking about.
Yeah.
And what is even more important is to actually understand what is behind these labels. You see between the EPP, how big are the national delegations. You will see that the German delegation will remain very strong in the EPP. You will see, on the other hand, that in the S&D, it will be specifically the Italian delegation probably very much being much stronger when we have the results from the UK, we will see that Labour will be much, much stronger. So this is clearly something we cannot see here, but the changes take actually place within these groups.
Sure. Now, Professor Kading, I'll have to cut you there because right now we're going to go back to the Hemicycle to Hannes Swoboda, who's going to be speaking from the Socialists.
A new boost to the European elections. Otherwise, the projections of fall down could have been true. But I want to say at the beginning, yes, it was a step forward. But finally, we should draw the conclusion that maybe it was not courageous enough, that we should go perhaps for the direct election of the President of the Commission to give the voters a chance to say clearly, I am for this or for this gentleman or this and this lady who should be the President of the Commission. Because many of the voters I met said, why can't I give a direct vote to the candidate for the Commission President? Secondly, you see the projections. We have a bit other figures, but that we see what the real result is. But also this result, as well as my figures or our figures, show very clearly that there was a dramatic loss for the EPP, between 20 and 25% of votes. Yes, it seems, at least to these figures, also the figures I have for the moment, that the EPP is in lead, but with a drastic reduction of support. And that for me and for our group means that the vote of the citizen has been against the policies which were dominated by the EPP in the last years, by the majority in the Commission and for a long time the majority in the European Council. So that gives us the possibility as a group which in any way is much closer to the EPP, as closing the gap between the EPP and us, a stronger position in the next parliament. Our figures shows we won several seats in several countries, but in any way it is clear we have a stronger position as Socialists and Democrats in the next parliament vis-à-vis the strongest group, if that is and would be the EPP, and we will use that possibility. Now you know that the group leaders signed an agreement that the number one can start to try to find a majority, and that we accept. I don't speak any other thing now than I spoke before, but it must be very clear that if Mr. Juncker wants to be Commission President, again and again I heard he does not want to be, but if he wants to be, he has to accept also our basic wish to change policies in Europe. Change policies in Europe dramatically away from austerity, much more for jobs in Europe, and of course also in communication between the citizens and the European institutions. So this is what I want to say tonight. All the rest we will see.
Chairman of the Social Democrats, Hannes Swoboda, they're talking about the projections, and what he was saying is that there's been a 25% loss for the EPP party, and that this reduction of support shows that citizens are against the populists. What would you say to that, Professor Kading?
Well, I think this is one way of looking at it, obviously. But I think if you look at the projection we just have here, it is not only the EPP losing, but also some other parties, and the SD clearly not winning greatly for the time being. We just talked basically about the EPP and the SD and said it's not about the total figures, but it's also about who will have something to say within these groups in the next parliament. And we pointed out the fact that the Germans and the Polish delegations in the EPP will be very strong. Yeah. The Italian, the German, and the British one very strong in the SND. And for the third biggest, as it looks
ALDE
right now...
Now the ALDE is called the Kingmaker. Do they still,
Yes.
I mean, they have now come third. Do they still get to be that? Have
Yes,
that role?
I think they will be still the kingmaker, and they will be quite important also for the upcoming question who will become the next president of the European Commission. In this respect, however, what we need to understand is that it is a totally different ALDE right now, because the German FDP and the British, as we will see, the Lib Dem, they will completely lose their seats. And with this, on the contrary, we see that other countries such as ANO in the Czech Republic or they basically become much more important.
Okay, Professor Kading, we'll be back with you a bit later. Well, actually, I guess Paul will be back with you a little bit later.
Thank you.
And right now, we do go back to Paul himself.
Thanks very much indeed, Mariam. We're going to resume our discussion on immigration, one of the key issues to dominate this whole campaign for the European Parliament in 2014. We're going to turn to the question of Europe's external borders, an ever controversial question. Let me ask you first, Davis Lewin, whether you think Europe's borders should continue to be fortified and fortified and fortified by all the means possible in order to manage the question of illegal immigration, or other solutions called for?
Again, let me say it's a very grave moment in the history of Europe, the success that parties of the far right have had on this immigration issue. So we must be serious about the realities of the problems of controlling immigration with the confidence of the electorate. So yes, the border regime that Europe has is broken. Immigration, the ability to control immigration is not working properly.
And how to fix it then?
Well, we've seen Mr. Sarkozy's recommendations about the Schengen tool. I am in favor, in principle, of open borders, subject to it being the case that you have the confidence and the ability to manage it, but we don't see that.
Let's just make sure that our viewers understand what Mr. Sarkozy has been proposing, which is the complete eradication of Schengen. So every member state is responsible for their own border management. Situation back to how it was before Schengen came into
What he has proposed is a Schengen 2 type arrangement whereby countries that agree on immigration policy, that is the key, that they are harmonized in the way that they see immigration. But look, it comes down to this very simply. This is a technical problem, not an emotive problem about humanitarian issues. It's a technical problem of, are you able to know who is moving into your country and into your territory and out of it? And we have seen time and time again that across several key nation states, this problem has continued to exist. I know the situation in Britain very well, and it's a very serious, very real problem where the centrist parties have lost the faith of the electorate across the political spectrum.
Let me bring Carl Kopp in there. Do you share that that belief that something has to happen to Europe's external borders and perhaps internal borders?
Yeah, okay. We would suggest to have a regime based on human rights, and these are open borders. Open borders in a sense that you are able to cross them. Again, nobody should be obliged to go dangerous ways via the Mediterranean or Aegean, being pushed back by border guards and so on. So we don't want this, and we don't want to shift the responsibility to the southern countries, and the whole Europe try to shift the responsibilities for refugee protection to North Africa or other places. So we don't want this. And it's more, if you want to fight this death trap, then you have to do something different. You cannot.
But what different? I mean, you can't presume to monitor every single square centimetre of the Mediterranean or every single square centimetre of the Europe's external border.
As a refugee, I'm obliged to
if I may,
use the services of smugglers or whatever. Why
forgive
not
me. Forgive me. It might feel good, but you don't have the democratic mandate to open the borders to refugees from the Syrian
We're going to cut it
conflict
right there. I'm sorry, because we're going to cut to another political leader. Mariam, over to you now.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Well, now I want to go back to the Hemicycle, where Guy Verhofstadt from ALDE is speaking to the Hemicycle. Let's take a look.
It should be a positive day for the democracy and for tolerance. And unfortunately, what happened yesterday in Brussels was quite the opposite. A dramatic example of intolerance in our country and in Europe. So, ladies and gentlemen, my first remarks are very clear. First of all, the turnout. For the first time, the turnout is going up more than 43%. It's only a small change with the 42% of the elections of 2009. But if for the first time in more than 30 years, we see that the turnout is going up. And in my opinion, that is one of the consequences of the way we have handled this European election, the fact that European political parties had candidates for the presidency of the European Commission, and maybe I hope that we can go further in that direction by having direct elections for the presidency of the European Commission in 2019. My second remark is that, as you know, our group, the Alliance for Liberal and Democrats for Europe, has actually 83 seats in the Parliament, and this projection, this forecast, this poll gives us 74 seats, so that means that we have already secured more than 70 seats in the new Parliament, and that in any way, with this outcome, we continue to be the third group in the Parliament, as we are now for the moment. The third group bigger than the nationalists, the populists and the Eurosceptics. But we shall try to beat also this poll that you see on the screen there, this projection. Because we are, besides the 74 seats that we have secured now, also in negotiations in 6 countries to have an additional 16 seats in these 6 different countries, securing nearly 90 seats in the next Parliament, and by that being bigger than the 83 seats we were in the previous Parliament. My third remark is to underline that also in a number of countries, pro-European parties have won the elections. It's not only, don't look only to France. I like France, I have nothing against France. I like it very much. But there are also other countries where the trend is quite the opposite. And the most best example of that is certainly the outcome of the elections in the Netherlands, where the pro-European D66 party became the biggest party, together with the liberal VVD party, and bigger than the anti-European party of Mr. Wilders. And then my last remark is very simple. It's clear that after this battle for the electorate for a few weeks, we need now to decide on the presidency of the European Commission. And I shall repeat what I said in all the debates that I did with my different colleagues the last week. It has to be one of the candidates that presented himself in this election that has to be nominated as the President of the Commission. It is for us unthinkable, and we shall not give our votes in the Parliament to somebody outside the candidates. Otherwise, this whole exercise, this whole democratic exercise, is just a little game. And that is not what is at stake in a democracy. What is at stake in a democracy is to build up a majority in this House, and to nominate one of the candidates for that mandate.
Now, I think we have time for a couple of questions. I have an indication from James Fontanella-Kahn from the Financial Times, and if Robin Emmett from Thomson Reuters could stand by for number 2. James.
Sir, we've seen, first of all, don't you think it's a bit kind of absurd to celebrate the fact that there's been a 0.1% increase in turnout, to celebrate that? Because the majority of Europeans still decided not to go and vote. And on the basis of that, we've also seen of those who did go.
From the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats, and he was there talking about these 77 seats are projected for his group. He was talking there that European parties have actually won the elections, and he also did touch upon the sad events from yesterday, the shooting where 3 people were killed at the Jewish Museum in Brussels. Well, now we're going to continue with one of the themes, the Euro crisis. Let's take a look at this video.
I think we have to keep the euro. Just imagine, for example, Germany. We have, in the moment, we are lucky to be quite strong in economics. But if we didn't have the euro, that would mean that our products would be very expensive. Nobody could buy them.
It's getting worse and worse. Many people are being thrown out of their houses, and the banks are taking everything. They've cut my pension. I still work, and they've cut mine and my husband's pension. It's not fair.
de mi marido y la mía. Y no hay derecho.
Η Ελλάδα είναι η χώρα στην οποία μπορεί κανείς να δει.
Greece is the country which gives you a complete image of the euro crisis. The results of this crisis can be clearly seen by anyone walking on the streets of any large or small city in Greece. It's very ugly. It's tragic.
Πάρα πολύ άσχημα. Είναι τραγικά.
Well, it seems we're just minutes away from the announcement of the results of the European elections 2014 here on Europarl TV. Voting began in the UK and the Netherlands 4 days ago. We'll be cutting live to the official results when they come in. Meantime, let's look at the issue that's concentrated the minds of leaders and the protests of people across Europe for the past 5 years or so, the management of the Eurozone crisis. With me now to discuss that are Eric de Coylenaire, Professor at Brussels School of Economics, and Professor Ioannis Tsamorgelis, Professor of Economics at the University of the Aegean in Greece. I mean, let's go to some of these comments that people were making that we just heard before that introduction. That's the fact of the matter, isn't it, Professor de Coylenaire, that the human impact and the human cost of the management of the Eurozone crisis has been forgotten?
Right. Well, what's mostly been forgotten is that the reason for the crisis is really to start with a financial crisis and the run-up to that financial crisis, meaning exaggerate deficits and exaggerate real estate financing, real estate bubble. And as there was a whole build-up to this crisis, and well, the mechanisms of the Eurozone were not at all equipped to deal with that kind of crisis.
Although they should have been, according to the Euro terms and conditions.
Well, they should have been, they were in fact designed to avoid this kind of crisis, but they were in fact not applied. And then the consequence, for many people in the comprehension, in the understanding of many people, it is the Eurozone itself.
Okay, let me put that point to Professor Tsamorgelis. Do you share that the point that you go back to the problem at its fiscal root, and that's what's got to be sorted out, no, whatever happens to the people?
It's not only the fiscal root, it's also fiscal along with the monetary root. It has two roots. As it is designed, the monetary system in Europe, the result comes out to be that whenever the economy goes well, then the monetary system, the banking system provides money. And when the economy does not go well, the monetary system and the banking system absorbs money, which is the bad case that we are living now. This is what creates more crisis, more bad situation for the ordinary people and the small enterprises. We need another kind of mix of policies. That is, okay, we have to go to fiscal consolidation, but in order to help entrepreneurs, to help firms, we have to provide liquidity in order to facilitate them to overcome the crisis.
Can I ask you just to hold that, because we're going to cut once more back to the Hemicycle for another MEP. Mariam, over to you.
Doreen Stevenson from the ECR group, and obviously all the parties are making these announcements. The Hemicycle, so let's now go over and see what he's saying.
7 member states, we are confident that we may end up with more participating member states than we have at the present time, and that this figure will be seen to be dramatically short of what we will end up in our negotiations with many parties of the centre-right across the whole of Europe. Our party is a reformist party. We're the European Conservative and Reformist Group. We've seen from the election results across the whole of Europe that hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people, have demanded reform. And that has been our core platform since we founded our group 5 years ago. I wish all of these people who were demanding reform were voting for parties who participate in our group. But I can tell you that we are going to see big changes in the new Parliament. We cannot ignore the voice of so many millions of European citizens. It is time that we started listening, and it's time that we started on the reform agenda in a serious way. When I've been asked why we did not put forward a candidate for a Spitzenkandidat for the presidency, because we do not believe that that is a legitimate election. We believe the Lisbon Treaty told the Council of Ministers to take account of the election result. And if they take account of the election result, the centre-right and the right have won this election. But to put forward Jean-Claude Juncker as a candidate would not meet with the approval, I'm certain, of our ECR group. We would want to see somebody of more of a reformist agenda from perhaps the EPP, if we are to support anyone at all from the centre-right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. In order to keep the timings working, we'll just have one question.
And now we're going to go to Dominika Kosik. And now we're going to go over to Dominika Kosik in Warsaw.
Hello.
Dominique, what can you tell us? I mean, what's the latest from over there?
In Poland, we don't have a big surprise. The best result for this moment will go to the platform Civic, which is a leading party in Poland, member of EPP group. So only 2 points less.
Okay, well, I'm going to be having a few technical difficulties there, so now we're going to hand it back over to Paul. Paul?
Indeed, we left our debate on the Euro management of the Eurozone crisis with Professor Tamurgelis saying that the fiscal approach, the approach to get budget deficits down and to try and reduce sovereign debt isn't all that you could do. You speak, I think, from the heart in Greece, where you've had to deal with the prescriptions of the Troika and the European Union. How should that change in the future?
It should change immediately, actually, by providing liquidity to the economy. Providing it's the main issue, because without liquidity,
how do you do that?
You don't have
pull
the
money
economy.
from trees.
You don't have money circulating the economy. You don't have firms, existing anymore, especially the small firms, and you have huge unemployment. An average owner of a small firm faces higher taxes, lower demand for his products. And the same, what he has to do, he has to fire people and reduce wages. At the same time, though, he's facing a 12% interest rate on his loans, which is as you are murdering the entrepreneur there. That's why you have 30% unemployment. You have to change the policy. You have to facilitate through monetizing the economy, creating money and providing loans.
Okay, okay, we're going to interrupt. I'm just about to ask you a question. We're going to turn back to the Hemicycle for the GUE, and I think it's leader Gabriele Zimmer.
Die Wähler und Wählerinnen schon sehr genau entschieden haben, was sie künftig wollen. Ich möchte aber jetzt die Gelegenheit erst einmal nutzen, um von Berlin aus auch mein tiefstes Bedauern, mein Mitgefühl und zugleich auch mein Abscheu über das gestrige Attentat auf das Jüdische Museum in Brüssel auszusprechen. Ich glaube, wir alle in den einzelnen Mitgliedsländern der Europäischen Union fühlen mit den Angehörigen der Opfer. Und ja, wir hoffen, dass die Hintergründe sehr, sehr schnell aufgeklärt werden können. Aber was ich vor allem sagen möchte, ist, die Wahlen zum Europaparlament insgesamt haben bei aller Problematik doch eins deutlich gemacht. Viele Wählerinnen und Wähler wollen einen Wechsel haben. Sie wollen einen Wechsel haben für eine andere Politik. Es gibt welche, und die sind leider mit einem sehr hohen Anteil auch in das Europaparlament eingezogen aus den verschiedensten Mitgliedsländern, wahrscheinlich auch mit einem Mandat zum Beispiel aus der Bundesrepublik Deutschland, die den Menschen suggerieren, die Europäische Union sei nicht das, wofür man gemeinsam stehen müsse. Soziales und Solidarität seien keine Werte, für die es sich lohne einzutreten, und jeder komme nur am besten mit sich selbst zurecht. Also die Losung zurück in das Nationale und dann bitteschön aber auch nur soziale Standards für die eigenen Staatsangehörigen. Das alles hat mit der europäischen Idee nichts zu tun und wir stehen insgesamt als Fraktionen aus meiner Sicht auch vor einer großen Herausforderung, im Europaparlament so zusammenzuarbeiten, dass wir klar und deutlich auch sagen können, wir stehen für eine Europäische Union, in der die Werte des Einzelnen, die Würde und auch die Rechte des Einzelnen gewahrt werden, gestärkt werden. Wir wollen mehr Integration, wir wollen soziale Grundlagen, wir wollen Solidarität, wir wollen ein Ende der Austeritätspolitik, wir wollen ein Aussetzen der TTIP-Verhandlungen, also der Verhandlungen zu dem Freihandelsabkommen der EU mit den USA. Ich hoffe, dass wir dazu die demokratischen Kräfte innerhalb des Europaparlaments auch gemeinsam bewegen können. Ja, und das sei mir noch ein Wort zum Abschneiden der Parteien links von den Sozialdemokraten in der Europäischen Union mit gewährt. Ich freue mich sehr darüber, dass wir zulegen werden. Und ich glaube, es ist auch wichtig, dass die Linken im Europaparlament ein gewichtiges Wort mitsprechen werden. Wir werden unseren Einfluss nutzen, um insbesondere darauf hinzuwirken, dass tatsächlich das Troika-Diktat beendet wird, dass es sofort gestoppt wird und dass es um die sozialen Rechte der Menschen innerhalb der Europäischen Union geht. Ohne das, glauben wir jedenfalls, wird es keine Zukunft der Europäischen Union geben können. Wir wollen, dass die Europäische Union auf solide, auf soziale Grundlagen gestellt wird. Das ist unsere Gemeinsamkeit, dafür stehen wir. Und ich freue mich schon auf die Zusammenarbeit mit den Genossinnen und Genossen, den Kolleginnen und Kollegen aus den Parteien, die zu uns kommen, auf die neuen Mitglieder. Und
That's Gabriele Zimmer there, the leader of the GUE group, speaking, it seemed, through a live link into the Hemicycle here in Brussels from Germany. A quick recap of some of the things she was saying, that the voters clearly want change, they want different politics, they want a social basis, solidarity, an end to austerity and an end to the activities of the Troika, which takes us very neatly back into our debate. I think, Professor Tsamorgelis, you were saying yourself that the activities of the Troika need to stop in Greece because there's just too much prescription going on and not enough stimulus or growth. Is that right?
It is. And I would proceed on that and say that European Union has to change also. The way that it faces and the way that acts in order to overcome the crisis, it's a wrong prescription. We need more money. We need to find ways for cheap money in order to stimulate the economy.
Okay, let's just hold that thought there. We were on the Troika. The Troika is a key instrument here in the Eurozone economic crisis management. Let's just watch this short video on its function and activities.
2010 heralded in the era of the Troika. The band of brothers was made up of three powerful EU institutions: the European Central Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the Commission. Their role? Providing cash for crisis-hit countries. But theirs was a system of give and take. The trade-off for cash? Punishing unpopular austerity measures. With the peak of the crisis behind us, MEPs launched an investigation into the Troika's democratic legitimacy and travelled to the countries worst hit by their policies. First up was Ireland, which received €85 billion.
It was necessary to do a bailout, but it wasn't necessary to apply the one-sided austerity policies. We have our health service on the point of collapse. We've lost about 20% of our jobs.
Next on the whistle-stop tour, Greece. It was here that the situation turned from desperate to volatile.
That produced extremely high inequalities in the Greek society, and this is a very dangerous situation.
The investigation, backed by a full House, has called for better democratic governance of the EU. And the Troika? Well, they still have a job to do. But is a reshuffle in order?
Okay, we're going to come to you in a second, Professor Tricolour, but first of all I'm going to cut to my colleague Maria Maggiore, who's out and about the European Parliament here. Maria.
Yes, Paul, I'm here with Socialist President Mr. Swoboda. A first comment is not yet the final result, but it seems you are losing.
No, we are not losing. I think we are gaining some seats. The EPP is the great loser. They lost 20 to 25% of their seats in the European Parliament. They are, for the moment, still number one, and maybe that's staying, but you have to lose 20, 25% and then call yourself a victory. That's not a victory.
Is there still a place for Mr. Schulz to run for this?
There is still a place for Mr. Schulz, of course. Mr. Juncker has the first right to ask if there's an agreement, but let me be very clear, our group is for change. Mr. Juncker has not been the man for change and new methods and new policies. The vote of the citizens has been against the policies done in the past years, and now we have to have change. The most important things for us is a change in policies, and then we have to discuss about personalities.
If the results will be like that, so what will happen? Mr. Juncker will try to find a coalition, a majority for
we have to try to find a coalition, and we will put the conditions and on the table. We are much stronger in relation to the EPP than before. Therefore, we have a stronger voice, and that has to be respected.
Paul, do you have some questions for from the studio?
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Maria. I appreciate that. Let's return to our debate because although we have breaking news all around us, it is a critical debate, and I hope we'll sort of find our way through to future ideas. Can I ask you, Professor Tricolour, what you make of all that? You know, here's a call for an increase in liquidity, an end to austerity, because they just don't work. They don't allow businesses to grow and the business of creating jobs to start.
No, that's right. Now, I think what we need, we do need structural reforms in many areas in Europe, all over Europe. Some of those reforms are common to all of Europe. It is the financial. And there I totally agree with Professor Tsamogelis that in many European countries there is a shortage of financing simply because we have a system that's far too much banco-centric.
But there's, yeah, no, I understand that, and that's going to be a question that we come to in a second, the dominance of the banks. But this is a question of policy drive and policy direction, right. And the call on this side of the table is an end to austerity. It doesn't work.
Right. The problem is that the austerity is, in many countries, the only way that has been possible to force reforms that were needed. Some reforms were needed, are needed. Of course, in some Mediterranean countries, there was a problem of tax collection, there was a problem of social transfers. In Belgium, for instance, and in France and in Italy, there is a problem of financing the social security to a large extent by levies on labor costs, which means that labor costs are far too high, and the difference between the gross cost of labor and the net income of people is far too high.
Okay, let me put those points to Professor Tsamogelis. Do you accept any of that? Do you accept some of it? What's good and what's bad?
All of that, but again, I would proceed and say that we need to look again the banco-centric European structure. We are dependent on the banking sector too heavily. And this creates a huge problem for the future of Europe. We need another kind of thinking on the financing and on the monetizing of the economy. We need more serious capital markets so as to reduce the role of banks. We need another kind of banking system with more competition, more banks, small banks, private banks, corporate banks. So another mixture of the financing sector which will facilitate growth. Our main issue is low, cheap money and a lot of money available to those who need it.
And Professor Tricolour, how much of that is a sort of utopia given the snail's pace at which reform within the financial and banking sector in Europe actually moves?
I don't think it is utopia. I think it is absolutely necessary. And for that, we need for the governments to realize that they can get out of the grip of banks, there has
been...
been...
You say that Britain, for example, let's talk specifics here. Britain runs about 75% of the financial services of Europe. Has got an incredibly powerful City of London with a very powerful lobby supported by the current government there. What chance is there of reforming along the lines that both of you seem to want when you confront resistance like that?
Well, Britain is a good example because Britain is the country which has gone the furthest at the moment to separate and to ask that commercial banks that take deposits and make loans do not engage in speculative market activities. Thus Britain from 2017-18 is going to be a pioneer there. Other countries, France and Germany, have refused that kind of reform because they are really taken hostage, blackmailed by their large banks. And we do need capital markets that are much more active, more competition in banks. We need those reforms. The US is today much further than Europe, and some reforms are now imposed on Europe by the US because the US, amongst other, in the derivative markets and in the clearing of derivatives, the US is imposing to Europe some measures that European banks had been able to resist so far, but the US is imposing them because...
And is that, Europe then becomes a block to proper capital flows, does it? Is that the point of the US?
Yes, the US is threatening to apply an extraterritorial status to the dollar-based activities, which, of course, would be a threat to the City of London and to big European banks. So some of those reforms are not utopian anymore.
Okay. Can you hold that thought? I hope we'll have time to return to this because I've got some other questions as well, but for the moment I'm going to hand over to Mariam. Mariam.
Thank you again, Paul. Well, now, Maria, roving reporter around the Parliament, has Mr. Dasserly with her. Maria, over to you.
Mariam, hi. Now I met here Pier Virginio D'Astoli, who people who live here have been here for a long time knows very well. He's the president of the European movement. He worked on the convention. He worked with Spinelli, of course. We have to remember Pier Virgilio. How do you comment the first result we have?
First, it's clear that this idea to have candidates for the President of the European Commission created kind of public space. I think that one of the things, the fact that the people voted more than in 2009 is because of this idea to have the candidates. It was a good idea. And second, concerning this idea, I think that the European Council have to take into account the fact that the EPP, that for the moment is the first group, but EPP had a very bad result. So it's not so easy to say that Juncker won the elections.
Yes. Just a moment, because they asked me the line. Back to you, Mariam.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Maria. Now we're going to cut back to the Hemicycle where Nigel Farage from UKIP, from the EFD, is talking to Hemicycle. Let's take a look at what Nigel Farage has to say.
Firstly, the Eurozone, which clearly doesn't work and has left a vast swathe of the Mediterranean now stuck in a downward deflationary spiral. And secondly, the enlargement of the Union to bring in the former Soviet bloc countries with the rights of free movement between poor and rich countries. And they've been the two great errors. And I think that in the last 5 years, those errors have been seen to be real mistakes. And we're going to get, a good number of Eurosceptics elected to the European Parliament. Whether that makes a big difference in European politics remains to be seen, but it's going to make a very big difference in the domestic politics, particularly of the member states, predominantly in the north of Europe. And I think that up until now, European integration, whether one liked it or not, always seemed to be inevitable. And I think that inevitability will end with these results tonight.
Well, as you said, the failing Euro project has engendered poverty and unemployment to millions across Europe. Do you think that this has played a large impact on the European elections yourself?
Oh, I do. And I think that, repeated bailouts of countries, enabling them to stay members of the euro, and yet, a few years on, people can see that that's actually given no economic benefits at all, has led to a widespread scepticism, a scepticism in the south that actually things may not get better, and a scepticism in the north that perhaps they're going to have to go on endlessly putting their hands in their pockets. So I think that what the euro has done is to divide Europe between North and South in a way that actually the European project was supposed to stop. I mean, there is a degree of enmity that we've seen over the course of the last 3 or 4 years between the Germans and the Greeks. And the European project was supposed to bring us closer together and to love each other a little bit more.
Hello, Nigel. How are you keeping?
Hello.
Having a good week?
I'm very well, thank you.
Very good.
I think so.
The gravedigger of national democracy, your friend Herman Van Rompuy, said that he wants the EU to expand eastwards, even though the public are opposed to this. What do you think of that?
Well, I think the European Union...
OK, and that was Nigel Farage from the EFD talking there to the Hemicycle. He was talking there a lot about Euroscepticism, and of course, UKIP is projected to win big over in the UK. Now we'll go back to our reporter Maria, who's with Mr. Dastoli.
Okay, we come back. So we were talking with Pier Virgilio Dastoli, the president of the European movement. Pier Virgilio, just we move because there is another group who is pushing us. But if results have confirmed, the current balance will not change. I mean, EPP will decide politics and we will make an alliance with Socialist. How do you see this future of Europe?
Apparently, EPP will be weaker than the past legislature. It will be very weaker. So that means that it has to negotiate with the others. The Liberals maintain their third position. That is not very bad. We saw the result of the Liberals in Dutch, in Netherlands. It's a very good result.
And how do you see the result of the Eurosceptical movement? Will it help or will it create a problem in the European Parliament?
First, it will be very difficult or quite impossible that they will form only one group. So they will be divided in 3 groups. Many of these people will be in the non-members group. That means that they are not able to form a strong minority in the European Parliament. Of course, that will push the Europeists or the Federalists to be stronger than in the past legislature. But they have to organize themselves in a different way.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Pier Virgilio Dastoli. Back to you.
Thank you, Maria. Now, Maria there was with Mr. Dastoli. He was there talking about a weaker EPP, which may need the help of Liberals. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you very much indeed, Mariam. I'm going to bounce, if I may, directly from a quote there from Nigel Farage, who claimed, that's the leader of the UKIP in Britain, which has done very well in these elections, who claimed that the euro has been more divisive for Europe than it's brought them together. What do you think? Let me come to you first of all, Professor Tamargelis. What do you think? Has the euro ended up separating you from other countries or bringing you closer together?
Under this specific regime, monetary regime, yes. It brings us not together. It doesn't converge our economy to the economy of Germany. It diverges. Why? Because very simple. An entrepreneur in Greece faces an interest rate of 12%, while an entrepreneur in Germany faces a real interest rate of 1%. Is it possible for those two to compete? No. One will gain, while will always lose. Is going to be always losing. So we have to restructure the European Union, and restructure the way that the European Central Bank operates in order to have equal opportunities. And to bring you another issue here, the debt issue.
Let's turn to that in a second. Let me put the same question to you. How much has the protection of the euro in the Eurozone crisis brought all the countries in the Eurozone, 18 of them right now, together in the defence of one of Europe's biggest political and economic projects?
Well, I think that if you look at it long term, first of all, the euro was a political project. It had no economic reason and no economic basis. It was a political project, and it was probably badly designed. But during the first 8 years, 10 years, it did bring a lot of convergence, and it did bring a lot of prosperity. The problem is that a big part of that prosperity was false and was based on a financial bubble. No, for the last 5 years, it's been a retreating from that euphoria. Over the long run, we are stuck with it. It will be very difficult for individual countries to leave the euro. It would be very difficult to break up the euro. So, in the future, it is going to necessitate a bigger integration.
Okay, and while we're on the future, how is Europe going to deal with the sovereign debt crisis? I mean, the economic management programs put in place, the activities of the Troika, of the Eurogroup, of the fiscal discipline was supposed to bring sovereign debt down. And yet in many places we see sovereign debt climbing to completely unsustainable levels. What is the sort of plan or what should the plan be to deal with that?
Well, sovereign debt, almost by definition, will increase if the nominal growth of GDP is nil or 1 or 2%. We need a nominal growth of GDP, that's inflation plus economic growth, of 3, 4, 5%.
Which ain't happening.
But it ain't happening, and that's the biggest problem. To have growth-enhancing growth-enhancing measures and more growing economy, we probably need some structural reform. We probably also need the treatment of the legacy debt in the countries that have suffered the most.
Big issue in Ireland. Let's move to Greece now on this question of sovereign debt, because I know sovereign debt has certainly increased in Greece. How do you think it should be dealt with? And is it a real priority, or is it something that can be sort of pushed to the future while we deal with other stuff first?
No, it's a priority. 100% it's a priority, because it's a burden for the future development of the economy. I think that following what Professor De Colonel has said, I think we have to also discuss the mutualization of some of this debt. We have to realize that...
By mutualization, just so people understand, by mutualization we mean in effect sharing.
Sharing,
so that the burden of that debt is shared
across... It won't be on countries, it will be on activities. Because through this mutualization of debt, we should agree that we should finance infrastructure projects that secure the fact that all European citizens have the minimum of some standards of living. Through that, I think that we can accept the mutualization of debt.
And this is the place where...
the average standard of living should rest to the governments, to the national governments, but the minimum should be out of the financing of the...
Okay, sorry, hold it there again. We're going to hand straight over to our roving correspondent, Maria Maggiore.
And I can tell you, we have now already secured 74 seats. Tomorrow and after tomorrow, we shall secure another 10, 15 seats, and you shall see a liberal, democratic, pro-European group coming back to this parliament stronger than in the past.
Are you making an alliance with the Socialist and the EPP?
I make an alliance with those who are ready to follow our program.
Yes, we become our president.
Why not? You need to have a majority in the parliament, and I shall try to build up a majority.
Do you think it will be faster, the decision? It will take time now.
I don't know. What is fast in politics?
We gaan door.
Thank you very much indeed, Maria. Let's continue our conversation. We were talking about managing the question of sovereign debt. You had the word, Professor Samourgelis, in terms of doing that, managing sovereign debt, which you think is an absolute priority right now.
It is, yes. Especially for a country like Greece, which the debt is enormous. And I think besides this restructuring of debt, which is a political issue, how much restructuring we can afford, I think that we have, again, think about the concept of debt as a percent of GDP of the whole European Union, and I think we should discuss seriously the mutualization part of it. A small part of it should be mutualized.
Do you buy that, Professor De Colonel?
Yes.
The mutualization aspect?
Well, I think the mutualization will face very, very strong winds against it. It will be difficult, but something has to be done, probably on the restructuring of debt. The debt of those three countries really has to be reduced.
Yeah, sorry, just hold that thought there. Again, we're going to cut now back to Mariam. Mariam.
Well, now it's time to go to Dominika Kusik in Warsaw. Dominika, what do you have for us?
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
I am just I'm just left the headquarters of Platform Civic, the main Polish party, leading party, member of EPP group. And probably they will be again a winner of this election because they will receive, it is a result from exit poll, 34%, which is only 2% more than Law and Justice, the party of conservative party of former Prime Minister Jarosław Kaczyński. It was not, we didn't have big surprise during this election because Platform Civic was the leader and is keeping the leadership. Perhaps only one surprise, it is a good result. It will be 4 MEPs of very controversial Polish politicians, Janusz Korwin-Mikke, who is a never-ending candidate to Polish Parliament, and first time from the next 20 years, he will be a member of. Now he will be member of European Parliament together with 3 of his colleagues. It is the biggest surprise of this during this campaign.
Okay, lovely. Dominika, now, just to recap what Dominika was saying, the EPP group do seem to be, according to projections, winning the large share in Poland, and the ECR group are coming in second. There was supposed to be a chance that they could have maybe won an extra seat and beat the EPP, but that doesn't seem to have happened. So, Dominika, what more can you tell us?
Yes, it will be very interesting. I think that we will have very interesting situation because Law and Justice, who was in the previous term of European Parliament a member of ECR group, now is on the way to. Leader of this group told that probably they will join again to ECR, but they are also thinking about other solutions. For example, kind of coalition with EPP group. It is quite bizarre because. Okay, thank you.
Paul?
We've changed our guests here in the studio. We're joined by Struan Stevenson, who's an ECR MEP from Scotland. We're rejoined by Professor Michael Kading from University in Germany. And we're joined now for the first time by Doru Frantescu, who is a co-founder, I think, from Vote Watch Europe. Let me turn to you first of all, Struan Stevenson. We saw you in the Hemicycle just a short while ago saying that despite a poorer showing than the ECR in the UK might have hoped for, you seem still to characterise this as a good result for the ECR. How can that possibly be?
No, I was saying that the provisional results that they're showing, where they indicate that we'll only have 39 participating MEPs, is way out of line. I can assure you there will be many more than that.
In the ECR group?
In the ECR group.
Where will they come from? Well, they're based on members of the group as it stands at the moment.
Countries. I was predicting that we have 11 participating member states at the present time. I think there will be more than that. All of us, I can tell you, have been helping some potential colleagues in countries around Europe. And all of the people that we've been courting, they have to make up their minds. It may take some days, some weeks, before some of them will come forward and tell us that they do want to join. And then it has to be put to the whole group.
We're in a position now where we've seen sufficient results and exit poll results coming in to know that the centre-right has suffered quite significant losses. I mean, what is that down to? Whether it's your own Conservatives in the UK or Group ECR here or the EPP, where's the disillusion there at centre-right policies and politics?
Well, I think you have to be rather cautious here. I mean, if you look at the overall colour of the parliament that is emerging with all the results, the centre-right and the far-right together, the whole right-wing spectrum, are going to have by far the biggest...
I'm not talking about the far right, I'm talking about the centre-right,
I mean,
and you only have to look at EPP.
It's very dangerous for people, as I heard Hannes Swoboda earlier on saying, obviously this has been a vote against the EPP, ergo his assumption was that this would mean we must have Martin Schulz as President of the Commission. That doesn't follow at all in my book. Okay. I think the left have actually done rather badly, not only across the whole of Europe, but actually in Britain. a year before a general election, they've done spectacularly badly. So I think people have to be cautious.
Let's just hold that there. We'll come back to you on some of the nitty-gritty of what lies ahead in the next Parliament, including the vote for the next European Commission President. Let me turn to you, Michael. Can you share any of that, your thoughts on what you've just heard from Struan Stevenson? How much how far does your analysis of what we've seen so far go?
I think overall, when you look at the camembert, the new shape, so to say, and the color, you clearly see that the EPP has clear, huge losses. You have a stabilizing S&D, I would say, together also with the Liberals, considering that the parliament became smaller. I think the numbers clearly show that they stabilized. And I think, to a big surprise, the Greens didn't suffer as much as we expected. They are relatively stable as well. They even gained slightly in comparison. That would be, and they were not overtaken by the far left, by the GUE and GL, something we all expected beforehand.
So not everybody can have gained. Who has suffered in the camembert?
Yeah, I think the biggest losses we clearly find in the EPP and the European People's Party, and we also see that yes, are had to suffer, and here we also see clearly a change in the overall power game, internal structure of the ECR, with the Law and Justice Party, the Polish one, becoming probably...
The ECR may now be in the position of kingmaker I mean, in a hung parliament, and it's beginning to look like that. I think a lot of people will be knocking on the ECR door saying, we need your support, you know, to have a new president of the parliament, new president of the commission. We may be in a pivotal position.
And Michael, first, I mean, how much is the EPP's promotion of the candidacy of Jean-Claude Juncker going to be damaged by what's happened? Or are they still alive?
I think that's quite difficult to say. I don't say, I mean, there might be in the German election, there might have been a Schulz effect, as everyone is referring to currently. But it is much too early to call here a president of the European
Okay, good. Jolly good. Let's turn to you, Doro. I mean, what is your impression? You're a seasoned watcher of politics throughout the European Union here in Brussels. What is your impression about this election that was billed as being the most democratic ever? What is your first analysis?
Well, I think indeed it was the most democratic ever, because we have had some novelties. We have had, first of all, the race for the European Commission presidency. Whether that will go ahead up until the end or not, that's something still to be seen, and that's the big question. But the process in itself has been more democratic as a result of that, and I think that at least in some member states, in the member states that put forward the candidate for the European Commission presidency, the debates have changed in the sense that the European issues have been more on the agenda of those member states than in the past, and I think that's one change.
And what would you then see as the kind of pathway of realization of those voter aspirations that have been given space for the first time in a way that they haven't been given before, in terms of realizing those aspirations in actual policies that the EU deals with day in and day out?
I think it's difficult still for the public to see exactly the policies where the European Union has competences and where it doesn't. But I think that nevertheless the public has realized that there is some connection between what's going on in Brussels and the state of the economy, for example, and the state of the employment or unemployment. I think that this is the main reason for which the turnout hasn't gone down as compared to 5 years ago, whether the public or part of the public was against some of the policies which were promoted by Brussels, such as the macroeconomic supervision. Some of the public agreed to that, but on the overall, the public understood that here is where most of the decisions are being taken, and therefore the EU plays a role. And on the overall, I think that EPP is at the same time both the winner and the loser of the election. Yes, the EPP has lost the seats, but it remains apparently the biggest group in
One very quick final thought from you, Doro, before we move on to other issues. You're a seasoned, as I said earlier, watcher of European politics. Did you have any reservations at all about the conduct of these elections? Were they well conducted and in terms of transparency and openness and all the other standards that you would expect for an electoral process in Europe? Just briefly, if you had any
I think so. I think that generally the elections were pretty open, that the political parties could have done more to communicate their agendas and then policies. Yes, this is something which could have been done better, but I don't think there's any problem in the transparency or things like this.
Okay, let me pick up one point that's been made, not for the first time here in this programme, that actually on a European stage, European elections become national elections. They're sort of hijacked by national issues, and Europe has no way of kind of capturing the imagination. Do you think that's the case for these elections, or has Europe captured the imagination a bit more, even if it's a negative capturing of the imagination?
Well, I can tell you from my own perspective, I'm from Scotland, and in Scotland the whole election campaign for Europe has been overwhelmed by the forthcoming independence referendum, which will be held in September. So my postman the other day was delivering polling cards, and he said he'd spoken to 40 people, and they all said, "Why are you delivering polling cards for the referendum in September already?" And he said, "It's for the European election." The what? And no one had heard of the European election. Sadly, that has led to a slightly increased turnout in Britain as a whole, but in Scotland, a very low turnout again, because people are only focused on the referendum and independence. In England, it was, for the first time uniquely, an entirely different campaign. It was all about UKIP and about the in-out referendum in Europe. So completely different. I actually went to Barcelona, where the same debate is taking place. They're demanding a referendum and independence. And I'm saying to them, you know, I hope Scotland doesn't set a bad precedent which could trigger secessionist movements over the whole of Europe.
Just to go back to this question of the domination by UKIP of the European electoral agenda in the UK, I mean, does it strike you as a bit paradoxical that this is a negative approach towards Europe generally from UKIP? We want out, we don't support immigration policy, we think the euro is a disaster, that's its attitude. And yet at the same time we have 70% of legislation which affects the day-to-day lives of British citizens coming through from Europe. I mean, it's sort of paradoxical that voters aren't given a chance to get this, to make this connection.
But it's partly exactly...
Sorry, I was just going to, before you answer that question, I was going to introduce Jürgen Klute, who's just joined our table. A very warm welcome. Thank you very much indeed. You'll catch up with conversation in due course, I hope. Sorry, Stuart Stevens.
No, it's exactly that problem that I think has triggered the massive turnout of votes for UKIP. When I first became an MEP in 1999, the Book of Rules, the Acquis Communautaire, was 86,000 pages long. Barroso has repeatedly, in his 2 mandates, promised to cut red tape, to cut regulation. I asked a month ago with a parliamentary question, how big is the Acquis now? 156,000 pages. That's double in size, and that's making business, industry less competitive. Then people say we have 20 million unemployed in Europe. Okay. You're doing nothing about it. You're making it more difficult to create jobs and create prosperity with all this red tape. Okay. So, you know, if we don't do anything about it, people will vote with their feet. And that's what's happening. Okay,
let me turn to you, Jürgen Klute, from the GUE group and from Germany. We saw a strong performance from the Alternative für Deutschland, the anti-Euro party, who now are able to get into the European Parliament. What effect do you think that will have on parliamentary politics here and on, you know, any of the coalitions that might be built with some support from the AFD? What's your reaction to it, apart from anything?
Yeah, I think that's a big pity that they entered the European Parliament. It was, but on the other hand, it was clear after the German Constitutional Court deleted the threshold that they will reach.
But they've, even if the threshold was still there, they still got in.
Okay, but yes, it's a pity. And I think that's what I got in Germany. They are going to join the ECR, and they will at least support the Euro-skepticism.
Let me ask you a general question. I think that you weren't standing for re-election, or am I wrong in that? Or you were standing for re-election?
No, I didn't.
You're not
run
standing again. Good. So you're not outside, effectively, of the Parliament, or at least very soon outside of the parliamentary process. What was your impression of the results that we've had in so far, and the kind of Parliament that we're going to be seeing in the coming months emerge?
My first impression from the results is that the Euroscepticism is not so strong, didn't become so strong as we expected and feared of. But at the moment it's not very clear. We have this 56 other members, and it's not really clear who belongs to it. On one hand, the AfD from Germany, but pirates and other groups as well, and we have to look for the next day how it will be sorted, and then we can see how strong the right wings and the anti-Europeans became by these elections. At the moment I'm a little bit relaxed. I was afraid.
It's not the kind of seismic explosion that you expected then, is it?
I expected more. Much more.
Okay. Can I ask you, Dr. Frantescu, one thing that is promised by the British is, a series of reforms taking place within Europe, including the reduction of red tape that Struan Stevenson was referring to earlier in order for businesses to get going. What chances do you think there are in the coming term of the British being able to push through this agenda for reform and get its way in terms of repatriation of powers? Are Britain's European allies going to put up with that?
No, I think that the British have some influence in the European Parliament, but certainly they cannot do a lot of things on their own. So the British delegation, it is fragmented in several political groups, and even if UKIP has now got quite a big delegation after the election that will make a lot of noise. I don't think that effectively they will be able to influence the legislation that much as it is expected, or as much as they claim that they will do so.
Great, thank you very much. We're going to introduce another member to our panel, Wim van der Kamp, the Dutch EPP MEP. Many thanks indeed for joining us. I mean, I have to start off straight away just by putting it to you that it was a pretty disastrous showing for the EPP, no? Or how would you see it?
Oh, no, I don't think so.
How do you account for the reduction in the number of seats that it looks likely that you'll get?
Of course, but I think the result of 2009 was too much. At that time we had
this is a rebalancing, a natural rebalancing.
It's better for the democracy. It's better for the democracy in Europe. But at this moment, I think the EPP is with 211 seats in the exit poll can take the initiative to build a new European Commission. And that was one of the main aspects in these elections.
And where, if other leading groups, I mean the S&D at 193, I think, or 196, I can't remember which it was, as it stands at the moment, are confident they would be able to put together a coalition if it comes to them to create a majority in the European Parliament. Where do you think your support is going to come from, given the position of the ECR that doesn't support Jean-Claude Juncker as European Commission President?
I'm totally not convinced that the Socialists and Democrats can build a stable coalition, because with 193 seats they need a lot of coalition partners. These partners have different opinions on main issues in the European policies. So if they will start, this Commission won't work out in a proper way. Secondly, my personal aim is that, like we say in German, that we build eine große Koalition. The Social Democrats and the Christian...
You do realise we do have a German with us.
No. But he's not from the Christian Democratic Union, I think.
Okay. That's right, I'm from the opposite, from the left, yes.
You are from the Greens.
No, from the left.
That's good.
From the left? Oh, okay.
Good. Can I ask you, Wim, to wind up this argument, because we're going to pass over very shortly.
Yeah, no, but let me say this. I want a stable coalition existing from, like in Germany, from Social Democrats and the EPP.
Okay, good. Let's cut to my colleague Mariam. Hold your places, everybody. I hope we'll be able to come back to you very shortly. Over to you, Mariam.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Well, now we're going to head back to Maria, who has Hendrik from the UK Independence Party with her.
Yes, Mariam, in fact, I found here a new entry of the UKIP, so a new member, Phil Hendrik. Hello.
Hello. Not a member yet. So I'm waiting for my result in the West Midlands in the UK.
Yes, are you confident?
Touch and go for me, I think.
Yes. Okay, so what will happen now with the UKIP? Will you stay in the Freedom and Democracy group?
Absolutely.
Will you create a new group? Who will join you?
We're looking to obviously bring in new members. You see that Eurosceptic parties all over Europe have done very well. One thing I can say for definite is that we will not include the Front National in these negotiations, but there are 28 member states. There are lots of Eurosceptic parties that have similar messages to ours, so we will be looking over the next few days to negotiate a reformation of the EFD.
So this could be a problem, that at the end of the day, the Eurosceptical movement will not be in the same group.
Well, we have said maybe 100 times or more that the message that the Front National puts forward doesn't resonate with our message. And there are other Eurosceptic parties that we can happily form a group with, and we'll be looking to do that over the next few days.
Phil Hendricks, if you will become a member of this parliament, what would be your first proposal?
My first proposal? We shall see. I have a little secret up my sleeve, so I'll keep that quiet. I have a little plan that might surprise a few people within the parliament.
Okay. Good luck. Back to you.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Well, we cut Maria short there because I can now announce that the official results from the elections 2014 across 28 member states to elect 751 MEPs are now in. Let's now head to the Hemicycle, where Parliament spokesperson Jamie Duke is making the official announcement.
Hebben gedaan.
Hebben jullie nog vragen voor Wim van der Kamp? Dan stel ik hem nu. Ja, hebben jullie nog vragen?
It's my pleasure and honour to introduce the Party of European Socialists candidate for President of the European Commission, Mr. Martin Schulz.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to start, as a lot of colleagues did, first of all, with a moment of commemoration for the victims of the attack on the Jewish Museum here in Brussels. I think this is a terrible moment, and our feelings are with the victims and their families. I think tonight we open a new chapter of European democracy. The Parliament, whatever will be the structure of the Parliament and whatever will be the size of the different groups, which is for sure for the time being unforeseeable and too early to conclude the calculation. Whatever will be the composition of the Parliament, the next European Parliament will vote the next President of the European Commission. And this is an enormous step forward in European democracy. We fought for it, especially my political family and I myself, to end with the tradition that the President of the highest executive organ in the European Union is the result of a backroom deal. Now we have the real chance that the next European Parliament will vote the next President of the European Commission, and the next President of the Commission has to find a majority here in the Parliament. I think the group leaders will tomorrow and on Tuesday meet and discuss who will be the person with a mandate to build and to form a majority here in the Parliament. And in the light of the outcome of the meetings of tomorrow, we will see who can start to try to build a majority in the European Parliament. I think Jean-Claude Juncker will try to do it as myself will do, and it is foreseeable that we have to wait still some hours, perhaps days, until we know the final result. And what we can predict for the time being is that all groups belonging to the pro-European democratic spectrum of this House have to discuss with each other. And then we will see who will find the majority. A majority built on the basis of a program. And for me, The three core elements of such a program will be the fight against unemployment of young people. I think that the enormous problem in Europe is that in some of the countries we lost therefore a lot of trust to the European Union, that there is the risk that the whole generation is paying with their life chances for a crisis other irresponsible people has caused. Secondly, the fight against tax fraud and tax evasion. This is for the social democratic movement in Europe a key element. 1 trillion euros every year escape from taxation in the 28 member states of the European Union via tax evasion and tax fraud. To fight against that is the second important element, and to bring more rules and more control in the banking sector on the basis of what we achieved during the last month in the outgoing parliament, that speculators make billions of profits in euros and don't pay taxes for it, and when the same people produce billions of losses, the taxpayers have to pay for them. This is
okay, that was Martin Schulz, the President of the Parliament, talking to us there. He was talking about the Parliament's new powers to help elect the next President of the Commission. Of course, Schulz is one of those candidates. Now, I did mention a bit earlier there that we were announcing in the Hemicycle the official results for the elections 2014. And joining me to talk about some results that are actually coming in now is Natalia. Natalia, welcome back.
Thank you.
Now, what can you tell us? What are we seeing?
Well, first of all, we have to say that these are only provisional results because the UK ones are not ready yet. But so far, what we can see, the first conclusion we can draw is that the EPP stays as the first political force in the European Parliament, but it loses 62 MEPs compared to 2009. So the S&D group, which is the center-left group, although it also loses 11 MEPs, it manages to cut a lot the difference with the APP, with the center-right group, which is leading the parliament. And can you analyse for me where the seats of the EPP and the Social Democrats lost have now gone? Where have they been absorbed into? It seems that we see a lot of movement in this part of the graphic in the smaller groups. Many of those votes seem to have gone to the non-attached members. Those are members that don't have a clear political affiliation, are not attached to any particular group. But why would you think voters are voting for people who don't have any particular attachment? That means that the Eurosceptic groups that are far right, in many cases as well far left, are gaining many seats when we compare it to the previous parliament. Now, why is it that we haven't quite, got the votes for the UK? This is something that people are waiting for. When do we expect those results to maybe come in? Well, we will be updating this graphic that we can see here during the night. So we expect to have them in the coming hours very, very soon. Okay, certainly. Lovely. Good to know, Natalia. Now we'll give the floor back to Paul.
Thank you very much indeed, Mariam and Natalia. We're joined here by three MEPs, Jürgen Klute from Germany, Struan Stevenson from the UK, and Wim van der Kamp from the Netherlands. We're also joined by Doro Frantescu, who's from Vote Watch Europe and the only non-MEP here. We've just heard Martin Schulz speaking there, saying that it was likely to be an extremely long, drawn-out process for the negotiations over the the next president of the European Commission, or the negotiations before it goes to a vote. Do you think do you share that, Struan Stevenson, that it's going to be a long, drawn-out, difficult process, and that at the end of the day it'll be a two-horse race between Martin Schulz and Jean-Claude Juncker?
Well, the whole Spitzenkandidat scenario, I think, was illegitimate. I think it was not what was intended by the Lisbon Treaty. Let's be clear about this. The Lisbon Treaty stated that the Council had to take into account the result of the European elections. But suddenly we have this sort of illegitimate contest taking place between the group leaders and Martin Schulz, the President of Parliament. Now, when I was knocking on doors over the last month, no one in any of the doors I knocked on had ever heard of Spitzenkandidat. They don't know what it means. They've never heard of most of these candidates. In fact, of any of them, to tell you the truth.
Partly it's because they don't particularly care about Europe, isn't
well,
it?
so therefore,
also,
therefore
they get
it's
much
a
information.
completely illegitimate election. I mean, you must, at the end of the day, take into account the results of the election, and it's up to the council then. And if the council try to parachute Juncker, because the EPP have got the biggest number of votes, Juncker is the Archbishop of federalism. And I can tell you that the ECR would never accept him, and I guess all of the new Eurosceptics MEPs would not accept him either.
Let me put it to you.
Your group has to come forward with a moderate candidate.
Have you got one such moderate candidate in mind at all, or are you sticking with Jean-Claude Juncker?
I always learned in the media training, never answer a question which starts with if. So we just go on with Juncker. But to comment a little bit on my colleague,
very briefly before we
this is a European Parliament is building European democracy, and of course you are right that according to the characters of the Lisbon Treaty, we are going on into a next step. But the Council accepted it, the Commission accepted it, and the European Parliament accepted it. So this is a new development in European democracy. Of course, the Spitzenkandidaten were not well known, but anyway, we go on in this process and I like it.
Okay, can I ask you, Jürgen Klute, can you just define what you might expect different from a Schulz presidency of the European Commission compared to a Jean-Claude Juncker presidency of the European Commission? How are they going to differ?
I think Juncker stands for the policy of the German government, and this policy to face the crisis is dominated by the German government, by Madame Merkel. And I expect that Schulz is ready to change this. The main problem is the youth unemployment and the big social consequences of this type of facing the crisis. And I expect from, if he would become the president, then I will expect that he will change this kind of policy and hope that he will contribute to overcome the youth unemployment.
Okay, let me very quickly turn to you, Doru. Being the one non-MEP here, what do you think the legislative agenda should be? You know, when the next term sort of finally catches up with itself in July, once the business of selecting or electing the President of the European Commission is out of the way, what should the business be of the agenda?
Well, the agenda will continue to be set by the European Commission, because the executive is the one that has the prerogative of setting the agenda, and the Parliament has to follow what the Commission says. Of course, the Parliament can come up with its own proposals and can determine more or less where the Commission should go.
And what are you picking out then as the kind of key issues that will surface in the next 6 months?
Well, I think first of all there is the economy, that the European Union still needs to set its own agenda for the coming period on how to solve the remaining of the economic crisis, whether to increase the macroeconomic supervision or just stick with what it is now, whether to allow more investments in public spending, more growth, or to stick to the strict budget discipline. That's one thing. And then the other big thing, I think, also considering both the internal developments but also outside the developments of the EU, it's the energy policy of the European Union, which plays a role in the economy as well, because with high energy prices then you have a lack of competitiveness.
It plays into sort of European external policy as well and its relationship with Russia. Do you think, Struan Stevenson, that the European Union needs to alter its sort of foreign policy programs or its approach to difficult issues that have surfaced in the past years, as in the case of Syria, or in the past months, as in the case of Ukraine and Russia?
We have no army, but what we do have is great economic power. We're the biggest single marketplace in the world, 500 million citizens. We're almost twice the size of America. So, you know, we can use our economic clout to put pressure on people. That's why the sanctions that we've taken against some Russian, very wealthy Russian people who are influential in what's happened in Crimea, I think will hurt. It will hurt Putin and make him think again. That's the way we have to work.
Would you subscribe to that view as well, that the response for the European Union in terms of the number and strength of the sanctions has been adequate and it's got Putin thinking again about what he's doing in Ukraine?
I completely agree with my colleague. You see the last 2 weeks that Mr. Putin has become more quiet than he was before. The problems in Ukraine are not solved, not at least, but we have to continue in this way. And personally, I'm quite happy that we get a new coordinator on foreign affairs. We need some stronger person who can talk to Mr. Putin on an equal level.
Okay, with that thought, we're on the EU's relationship with the rest of the world, or at least with the East. We're going to leave our discussion. My thanks to everybody who's joined this panel. And I'm now going to hand over to you, Mariam.
And for the last time, we're going to try to go to Athens and to George. Kalispera, George, what have you got from us? What's the mood like? What's the atmosphere like over there where you are?
Kalispera, bonsoir du siège de SYRIZA, c'est l'enthousiasme ici, ils sont très contents, ils parlent de la
They're very pleased here to talk of a huge historic victory. This is the first time that a left-wing party has led the way. 3.5, that's currently the difference between SYRIZA and New Democracy, the government party. They wanted to compete in the European elections, to be ready for early elections at national level. That is what Mr. Tsipras has said today. He would like national elections held now. He would not like to see a new memorandum signed with drastic austerity cuts. He would like to see a general election. Mr. Samaras, however, has ruled out this option. He still has his legislative authority from 2012. It is hard to predict whether there will be early general elections in Greece or not. Now, SYRIZA has 26.4%, so they'll have seats in Strasbourg. They'll be gaining 5%, New Democracy 23.24%. They will join the EPP. And then, for the first time, we have an extreme right party, a neo-Nazi party that denies the Holocaust, and this party will have 3 seats in the European Parliament. 6 members of this party are currently sitting in jail. They are deemed to be a criminal party. We also have the Socialist PASOK. And they have established a new party. They hold 8%. They'll be in the S&D group in the European Parliament. And we have a new party. Potami, Stavros Domakis will lead this party. He set up the party 2 months ago and managed to get 6.58% and will have 2 seats in the European Parliament. We don't know whether he will join the S&D or not. He has been in touch with the Socialists, but has also been in touch with the Liberals, headed up by Mr. Verhofstadt, and has held talks with the Greens. It's not clear where those 2 MEPs will go. And finally, the Communist Party of Greece. It will have roughly 5% and will sit with GUI. Those are the results from Greece.
Okay, thank you so much, George. Thank you for all your updates from Athens. Well, now, for the last time, we're going to go to Thilo. And Professor Kading and Paul have also joined us on the set. Welcome to both of you. But first I want to talk to Thilo about social media for the last time. Tell us.
Okay, it looks quite good. I think by the end of the night we'll clearly have more than 1 million tweets on the European elections. You see the counter is ticking, not much is missing. And people are still commenting and discussing strongly on the net. It's past midnight, but it doesn't seem to hold people back. Now we moved a bit to Spain.
Yeah.
So currently before you were seeing the whole...
So this will be here. Talk to us about this one.
Partido Popular, Ghana, it's about the discussion that they ended up with, in estimates at least, because we don't have final results yet, they ended up with most seats in the parliament. UKIP is a big topic. I think probably first estimates are out. I haven't checked back. So much to the numbers, but it's not about stats only.
Sure, yeah, of course.
Social media is always also fun and the more weird stuff. We had another election going on. This is the winner.
What is that?
It's Shopska salad. Nearly 20,000 Bulgarians voted this to be the top dish.
Does that look tasty to you guys? I don't know.
No, it all looks like liver salad.
We have to give it a try. And there's some more fun stuff to be found. The lighter side of the net. Here, people in German, the WWF telling people, go to vote, use your last minutes.
Right.
Or this one, clearly a little hint to the Eurovision that we had a few days ago.
Of course, yeah.
Dance like nobody's watching and vote like the future depends on it, and it does. And we weren't spared. There was some criticism as well. But it's at least a funny way to tell people, go out and vote and care about this union of ours. And loads of people were sending in just random pictures from their voting day.
Random pictures showing that they are actually going to go out and vote. Well, that's really sweet. Well, Thilo, it's been a pleasure. Right, well, right now we're just going to head back to the Hemicycle.
For growth. Not.
Okay, lovely. Well, Professor Kading, you've now joined us. So has Paul and Thilo. You're also here as well. Now let's talk about the results then. How would you analyse those? What more can you tell us about that? I mean, the big parties haven't necessarily. I mean, obviously the EPP has won the biggest share, but the big parties don't really seem to be celebrating much.
No, but exactly, because you will see if you look at the seats, the distribution of seats, that you clearly see that the EPP together with the ECR will lose 79 seats. Also SND 11 seats, the Liberals 12 seats, the Greens 2. And it is specifically the GUE, EFD and the non-attached which are the winners. But at the same time, I think we have also seen tonight that we see specifically a big win for the right-wing populists. First place in France, first place in Denmark, and the second with UKIP in the UK. But interestingly here is that it is not the countries which were tremendously affected by the financial crisis. It is actually far-right populist countries winning, specifically in France, Denmark, UK, but also Austria, Finland, Sweden, Germany with the AfD, and also Poland. And I think that's quite a very interesting result as such. On the other hand, if you allow, you have a very strong far left, but it seems to be something we localize in the south only. And this is, for example, we see in Greece, we see in Portugal, we see it in Italy and in Spain, with the far left having roughly consecutively 30% of the share of votes. This is an earthquake in the south, but clearly a southern phenomena as such.
And do these results tell us anything about who could possibly be the next president of the Commission?
I think clearly the power struggle just started. It started a couple of months already. But I think we are just experiencing and seeing that there are no clear majorities. And even if now every spin doctor tries to convince the other that the one or the other is the winning one, I don't see it clearly in the figures as such. As I told you, the figures in terms of seats are clear. There are clear losers, the EPP, and there are winners as well.
I was just add one thing that struck me in the way we turn to the Hemicycle is the spin, the shine that all the group leaders put on their outcome. I mean, they would do that because they're group leaders and they have to do that, especially on election night. But I think it also indicated that there's going to be a lot to be fought for, and that most of them, if not all of them, are still in with some sort of shout and some sort of influence there.
Well, talking about that, we've now going to turn to the Hemicycle, where we have Tricolour from the Green Party.
Against such hatred. I want to also say that for us Greens, this evening's the results that have been shown, they reflect a very good outcome. We Greens are likely to have very good results in a couple of countries. We seem to come as second force in Sweden, which makes us very proud of our Swedish Green Party. We are likely to have gains, substantial gains in the United Kingdom, as well as in Austria, for example. And we might be able to welcome new members of the European Parliament from countries where we don't have any representation so far. For example, Ireland, Hungary, and Croatia. So this result makes us very proud, and I think it also shows that the green message is spreading also to countries where we didn't have representation so far, where we Greens had a hard stand so far. So I think we can be very proud of the hard fight that we've been taking, about the lots of campaigning that I've been doing in the last couple of months, and the very good candidates that we have had all over Europe. When it comes to the Commission presidency, a topic that will stay with us, all of us, for the next couple of days, and maybe even longer, we stand to our commitment that we think only one should become Commission President who has also been running for that office. But we Greens, of course, have also a couple of demands to whoever candidates for Commission President, because we Greens only give our green votes to people who are also supporting green policies. And that will go in particular for the areas of creating the green jobs that are so badly needed all over Europe, for creating jobs in the areas of energy efficiency, renewable energy, but also education and health, because those are the areas that are really of benefit for the whole of the society, but are also creating sustainable jobs and jobs that will stay with us for the next 20, 30, 50 years and really give a perspective, especially, but not only, to young people. And by the same means, we will also tackle the climate crisis and make ourselves more energy independent, which I think is really in our aim that we should pursue. But we also want to see a Commission President fighting for a more socially just Europe, a European Commission that ends the social cleavage that we see opening and widening in the European Union, and that really invests into the social rights of people. And thirdly, not lastly, democracy is something that every Commission needs to put on the top of the agenda. And that also includes a stop to the negotiations of the very intransparent and negotiations of a transatlantic trade agreement that goes against the interest of European citizens. We don't want this sort of trade agreement, and this is our demands as well to a new European Commission that wants to be supported by...
Okay, and that was Tricolour, the Green Party candidate for the presidency of the Commission, speaking there in the Hemicycle. Now, back on the set, I've been joined by Natalia and, of course, Paul and Professor Kading. Professor Kading, coming to you first, what sort of positive message can we all take from this election?
Yes, there are clearly also positive messages. It's not only an election about the extremes. You clearly see, on the one hand, that there are clear losses for Lega Nord in Italy. You also see that there is no seat for Attacker, for example, in Bulgaria. There is no seat probably for British National Party in the UK. The voter turnout, well, it's stabilized due to specifically the bigger member states, Germany, France, Spain and Romania. And you also see from the Netherlands experience that you actually can win the elections with a very pro-European campaign. You have D66 winning, you have the biggest winner in Sweden being the Green Environmental Party, the Women's Party. So I think that's very good news.
And then just really, what do you think the battles could be for the next parliamentary term?
The next battles for the European term will be about persons, first of all, and then it will be about content. And in content, there are many things that we basically will follow. That's something they inherit and will take it on board. And I think that was probably also the conclusions of your discussions during the evening.
I would just add the positive thing to arrive for me, having sat here, listened to the whole thing during the course of the evening, is that they were exciting. You know, European parliamentary politics can say, okay, we staged an exciting election, and that means that the period in the aftermath of that will also be exciting politically, theatrically perhaps even, and that, you know, is an advance, I think, for the European Parliament.
Lovely, Paul. Now, Natalia, I mean, you've been giving us the update, poll predictions throughout the night. Are we expecting anything later on throughout the night, maybe say around 1 o'clock in the morning?
Indeed, we are expecting to update the latest results we have already published on the European Parliament website during the night until 4 o'clock and then back at 6 o'clock in the morning. So for all journalists and all those people interested in covering these elections, please expect new information coming on the European Parliament website.
Okay, lovely. Thank you so much, Natalia. Pleasure to have you with us. Paul?
A huge thank you to you all and all of our guests throughout the night, and of course all of you for watching.
You can catch the rerun. All you have to do is go to europal.tv.europa.eu. But from myself and Paul and the rest of the team, and of course all of our guests and everyone at Europal TV, thank you and good night.
Good night.
Good night.